Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the No Laying Up podcast. My name is DJ. We have got a big one today. We've got a couple big ones coming for you back to back. Today is going to be the first episode of our Pete Dye deep dive. Me, Neil, and our guy Charlie Van Kirk are going to go deep into the catalog of Pete Dye. We're going to get part 2 of this episode out on Sunday. We are traveling around the world right now. Can't really do a normal Sunday recap this week, so we're going to do this back-to-back monster Pete Dye deep dive. Instead, really hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get there, of course, want to shout out, we are presented today, as every day, by our friends at Titleist. Playing the right golf ball for your game is hugely important. That's why Titleist offers different golf ball models to fit distinct flight, spin, and feel needs. Pro V1 is going to deliver the low long game spin, the maximum short game spin, a penetrating ball flight, very soft feel, golf ball used by yours truly. It's the right combination for players like Aaron Rai and Lottie Woad, both recent winners, Victor Hovland, so many other players. Pro V1 X flies in a higher window, spins more on full swings, has a slightly firmer feel, ideal for players like Ludwig Oberg, Lydia Ko, Matt Fitzpatrick, again, countless others. There's the new Pro V1 X Left Dash, Neil's golf ball, which now used by Jordan Spieth. We saw that switch a couple weeks ago. The Dash flies high like the Pro V1 X, but with dramatically lower full swing spin and an even firmer feel. Also the fastest ball in the lineup. Go look at Jordan's driving stats if you would like some proof of that. You owe it to yourself to find out what combination of flight, spin, and feel best fits your game. Head to Titleist.com to learn more. Let's get into it. We got a big one for you today, or at least the first part of 2 big ones, I think is what we're going to have. We're going to be talking about the great man, Pete Dye, a little bit of a follow-up to our CB McDonald episodes that we did earlier in the year. And to help me break it down is my good friend, Neil. Neil, greetings from New Jersey, my man.
Greetings, Deej. I don't know if break it down. I'm in the student chair. You know, I came to the seminar. I'm looking to learn about Mr. Peter Dye. Love his name. Obviously, named my son Peter. So I'm fired up. Know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to tell anybody else about him.
That's the guy who's going to be telling everybody else about him is our good friend Charlie Van Kirk. Charlie, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Excited that Neil is in the hot seat, the only student in the class this time. So nowhere to hide, man.
Yeah, great. Professor, I got a question.
Great.
I like your drum set back there. I'd like to play some drums with you.
Let's see some paradiddle-addle-oodles out of you, man. Come on.
Great student to teacher ratio in this class.
It's a Montessori school.
This is office hours.
This is. Charlie, you'll probably recognize or remember from, I always got to introduce him as the guy who made the Big Cans remix first and foremost.
Of course.
To a lesser extent, also did all the reporting on our Kapalua episode as well. And just a generally talented, curious, interested guy. And so, Neil, I think to set the table, you and I, along with the rest of our compadres, went down to Casa de Campo earlier in the year. It was kind of right after we recorded the CB McDonald episodes. We were like, well, what should we do next? And I think just walking around that place, we're like, man, I don't know anything about Pete Dye. We need to spend some time diving into Pete Dye. And so we tasked Charlie. We said, go find out everything you can find out. Charlie, what have the last couple months looked like for you?
Yeah, well, I've had my boots on the ground a little bit. I took the opportunity to do some due diligence and visit a couple of his courses. I wasn't with you in the DR, so I didn't go there, but I went a couple other places, interviewed 16 or 17 people who either worked with Pete and or were friends with Pete in different capacities. I read a couple books, scoured the internet for some other wonderful things that other people in golf media have made, and put into a giant doc for us to go through here.
A dossier, the Pete Dye dossier.
Sounds like it's a dossier to me.
The files. We're going to go through the Pete Dye files today, along with Charlie. I think everybody listening to this, just to kind of set the introduction, I think everybody listening to this probably, Pete Dye's prolific. I think everybody probably has an idea in their mind, a picture in their mind when they hear the words Pete Dye. Pop bunkers, railroad ties, bulkheads, island greens, visual deception. Neil, we're going to talk a lot about visual deception.
I think 80s, just any number in the 80s. I associate with Pete Dye. Whole length hazards that just, it might as well be white stakes because they're just the all down the left side. Don't hit it there.
Well, I think the other thing that's interesting about Pete Dye, again, kind of in stark contrast to our CB McDonald episodes, is, I mean, Charlie is a guy that died in 2020. You know, he's around. All of his proteges are around for the most part. It's kind of it's pretty recent history, which is very different. I think it makes this one a little more just a little more alive. You know,
I know you were upset that you couldn't get Stanford White on the horn for that
I
CB
wasn't that
back
upset. Wasn't that upset about that.
I don't know if we have any Stanford White equivalents in this episode, but yes, indeed, given that he passed only roughly 6 years ago, there are lots of folks on the Dye tree, the design tree, if you will, who are still around. One of the guys who I spoke with, George Fry, down on Kiowa, he said, you guys better make this podcast soon because everybody who knew Pete and Alice, we're going to the same place that they went.
Well, before we get too deep into it, Neil, like open forum, what set the table? Where are you at with Pete Dye? What's your experience? Has he stuffed you in a locker? Are you guys cool? What's how are you feeling?
Great deal of respect. Has my number. I don't play well on his golf courses, but I never walk off his golf courses being like that was unfair, or he just twists me up in knots. He's got a little bit, O's the mentalist in him, kind of like, how'd you do that, man? I didn't like, why did I do that? So he kind of lets you hang yourself a lot of times. But I think where what I know or how I've perceived Pete Dye is you had the golden age guys, we talked about CB McDonald, Donald Ross, you kind of had the guys from the early 1900s. And then it felt like, Tammany Hall took over, the Jones family, kind of Boss Tweed style. And Pete Dye is almost the connector to me, kind of bringing back or creating this tree, as you said, Charlie, of modern golf architecture of like, oh man, maybe we should go back to what they were doing in the 1900s. I feel like, I don't know how much of that he was doing, but I think a lot of guys that worked for him have then become students of history. And he also again, this is all just me, just how I've.
You're kind of batting you're batting 1,000 so far. I mean, this is
all
great.
right, good, because it also feels like Pete Dye, and I give the Foz credit here, like just an expert at building, like the nuts and bolts, the engineering of golf, like the proper way to build golf courses on difficult sites. Like, hey, if you need a guy that's going to figure out how to, similar to what you were saying about Seth Rayner in the CB McDonald episode, Deej, I've looked at places like Kiowa and Teeth of the Dog, like even the stories we were hearing down there, like they didn't have, like there were no telephones when they built that court. Like the place was just really remote and wild. And same with Kiowa from the Ryder Cup episode Solly did a long time ago. It just felt like, Pete was like, yeah, I'll get it done, and you have to have some engineering and some construction chops to do that. But he seems to have a foot in both camps of like, no, I also understand like the hoity-toity architecture, like nerdy stuff, the more the abstract concepts, but also like, yeah, this is how you grow grass and this is how you like keep water from this is how you drain water basically. So that's my novice take on it.
I think that pretty much nailed it, Charlie.
Yeah, we can call cut, I think. I don't know that I would use the word novice to describe that. That hit a lot of the juicy stuff right out of the gate. So we might need to call in some new students.
Well, let's start before we get into kind of like the nuts and bolts biography stuff. Charlie, what's the stuff that's going to keep popping up? What's the headlines? What are the what's the you click on, you get the AI synopsis of the local news article. Give me kind of some upfront stuff that is going to permeate all of what we're going to talk about.
To Neil's point, Pete was a provocateur. Someone asked me when I was hanging with Bobby Weed and his family down in Florida for this episode, Bobby's son-in-law to be asked me, "What's your lead, man?" And I said, Pete knew how to push your buttons. He knew how to freak you out, Neil. He knew how to lure your eyes to all the wrong places, mess with your.
So you mean this from a golf standpoint, or just like individually, like with humans?
From a golf standpoint,
okay.
There's a lot of fun stuff about him as a human. He knew how to throw a barb. He had what was described to me as like a proper Midwestern wit. We'll get into some stories there. So he was a true chops buster and a storyteller, but provocateur in the design sense. He loved to get you thinking about the wrong things and pull your eyes into the wrong places.
That reminds me, Deej, a little bit of Mike DeVries.
Sure.
As I described Mike, a true hockey guy, like, come on, just you're busting your chops, being with the boys. I like where we're heading here.
Yes. Well, I think that leads into kind of the next point, right? He's like a guy who was he was not designing this in an office building. You know what I mean? It was very design build.
His whole ethos was, let's figure it out in the dirt. This is not the guy you called if you wanted a set of plans in advance. Full
Really?
stop. Really. He was famous for throwing out any plans that he did draw. He self-proclaimed didn't know how to draw. His preferred method of drawing was literally sculpting mounds of dirt and sand, little scale models when he was out on site. So, you go down here and build me a bathtub there, or build me a waste bunker that's about this size, and let's physically drag my muddy boots in the dirt to illustrate what I'm talking about. And a lot of the guys who worked for him have adopted that sort of ethos. Even if some of them draw more plans than Pete did, they're like true designer builders. He didn't even like to call himself an architect because he wasn't formally trained in that way.
How about that? He's like calling backyard football plays.
Exactly.
Like, all right.
Yeah, a lot of broken
Hey, Fry,
plays.
you go deep, okay? And I want a hook route here from you, Gil. All right.
Yeah, a lot of broken plays out there. I think, Charlie, we got to just we got to hit this before the 10-minute mark here. If we're going to talk about Pete, we got to talk about Alice. I think that's a permeating truth through this whole story.
When I sat down with Roger Warren, who is the president of Kiowa, before I even could press record on the tape, he said, "I hope that whatever conversations you're having about Pete are also about Alice." And I assured him that was in fact the case. They had a really interesting partnership, and by all accounts, a very strong marriage. And she was a killer in her own right as a golfer and as a design partner. I'm not sure, how much that was publicized in the moment. Kind of depends on the outlet, but she's a super interesting character. We're gonna dive into her as well.
And as I understand it, she was the better golfer. Like, she was the golfer and almost got him into it. Is that right?
She was more accomplished in her own right. She didn't get him into it per se, but they started their design business together. Yes.
Don't sleep on how good of a player Pete was, as I did, and I did not realize that coming. Yes, absolute stud. Wow. Couple other things, Charlie. I mean, bundle of energy. We're going to hear a lot about the work ethic.
Yeah. Back to Bobby Weed in Florida.
He was finishing up TPC at Sawgrass, and he'd drive from Ponte Vedra to Hilton Head. And sometimes I'd hear him come in like at 12, 1 o'clock. And the next thing you know, he'd be knocking on our doors. We shared a condo, his son PB and I, and we shared a condo with Pete and Alice. And he'd be knocking on our doors at 5:30, and he'd be like, "Get out of that bed, you can't build no golf course line in bed." And I'm like, holy shit, he hadn't been here 5 or 6 hours.
I talked to one of his shapers who started working with Pete when Pete was in his 70s, and Abe Wilson, the shaper, was in his 20s, and he said that Pete ran him ragged. So yeah, just boundless.
Hustle, baby. I love it.
You kind of mentioned the self-deprecation, the aw shucks, kind of this Midwestern. So I mean, it wasn't a grandfather the whole time he was, doing this. He was obviously a young guy when he started, but this kind of very grandfatherly, like your wacky old grandpa sort of vibe, which is awesome, and it makes for a great book. We're going to shout out his book, "Bury Me in a Pop Bunker," a number of times throughout this episode. But that wit and that vibe kind of permeates that. I think he also you said this really well, Charlie, in our kind of like pre-work. This a lot of dichotomies, right? A lot of like almost contradictions in Pete Dye.
Yeah, the more people that I talk to about him, and the more that I even read his book, that Bury Me in a Pot Bunker, as you mentioned, that was written with Mark Shaw, the more he contained multitudes, in the sense that he had this self-deprecation, was not afraid to admit when he got something wrong, which is a very endearing quality. But he was confident as fuck about the stuff that he made. Like there are some news clippings that, like, this is probably certainly the greatest golf course ever. Like, there are some quotes like, "I just made something great and I know it." So, but he held these two things at once, and I think that's kind of a fun quality about him.
He's got a little fig jam in him. I like hearing that.
But it's all kind of wrapped up in this like, oh, shucks, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of moving dirt around. It's like, but I am the best in the world at doing it. Just so you know, which is like Charlie said, it makes for like a really good dynamic. So listen, a lot of directions we could go with this. We could take this in a bunch of different directions. Neil, you're the student, so we're catering this class. We're catering this class to you. We're calling this the history of Pete Dye and 10 golf courses. Okay. This is kind of loosely, or maybe not so loosely, maybe pretty directly based on a book I read a number of years ago, The History of Rock and Roll in 10 Songs, book by Greil Marcus. That's really good. So we might even throw out some song comparisons to each of these golf courses. Try to meet the analogy king where he is at.
Please meet the student.
So
how he learns. I like that.
Why are we focusing on only 10 courses that, Pete and Alice had their hands on more than 100 golf courses? It would have taken forever to get too deep into this. So we had to pick 10. To be clear, this is not a ranking. This is not the definitive list. This is not meant to be read into as like, these are the only 10 courses that matter. I think, Charlie, these kind of illustrate like an evolution. There's a specific technique. There's a reason that we kind of pick these two, because I think they kind of add up to the portrait of a man is what we're going for.
Yeah, a lot of choosing the 10 for me was which courses had the most interesting stories behind them. A number of these courses on this list, you could make multiple documentaries about just the multi-generational sagas that took place. It's hard to build a golf course. It's expensive. There are a lot of characters. There are changes of ownership. There's complex histories. So I looked for some of the juicy bits there, and also for some consensus opinions from folks who know more about golf course architecture than I do as to what were the most important and influential of his analysis, massive output.
So just confirming, no old head?
No old head in this.
Okay.
No, good question.
And the courses will go in chronological order, not any sort of order of importance. We're just going straight down the calendar.
Okay.
Charlie, we mentioned Bury Me in a Pop Bunker, the book he did with Mark Shaw. Anything else you want to shout out on the top as kind of overarching sources?
Yeah, in addition to the firsthand interviews that I did, Solly's 91 Ryder Cup deep dive was fantastic. There are a couple of other pieces of media by other folks in the golf world, one of whom's Eric Anders Lang did an interview with the man himself, with Pete, in I think it was 2012 or 2013, before his health started to deteriorate, and that was great. And
it's
Eric
awesome.
It's so good. And Eric has graciously agreed to let us clip some of that stuff out into this episode. And there were a couple of wonderful pieces by the Fried Egg. They've, of course, focused on a lot of architecture content over the years. They made a video about Crooked Stick that we will reference, and a deep dive pod on the Kiowa construction that will come up later. So some good stuff from them that I'll be pulling some quotes from as well.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into the man himself. You ready, Neil?
Ready.
I'm going to throw you a curveball right on the first pitch. I know you're looking fastball. I'm not giving you one. Paul Dye Jr., no middle initial, apparently, already at a good early wrinkle, was born on December 29th, 1925 in the great city of Springfield, Ohio. Trivia question. I thought his name was Pete, not Paul. Well, his dad's name was Pete, or I'm sorry, his dad's name was Paul. Now I'm already twisted up. No wonder they did this. His dad's name was Paul Francis Dye, and so people would call his son PD, which then became Petey, which then just became Pete.
Oh,
which is great.
No wonder. So no one says Peter. That's why I'm like, Peter Dye. It's like, no, you're wrong already.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
how about that?
And Springfield, Ohio, I know a city that's close to your close.
He was
to your
born
heart.
in Springfield.
He was.
Yeah, that's where my mom's from.
Exactly.
My grandfather was the mayor of Springfield.
I feel pretty good that your grandfather and Paul Sr. had to have known each other for reasons that we're going to get into.
Chase that down.
Yeah. Paul Sr., Pete's dad, multiple acts in his career. He did a lot of different stuff, kind of foreshadowing for his son. Different points. He was a politician. He was a postmaster. He was a bar owner. He was an insurance agent. Pete described his dad as a trim, effervescent man and his mom as a strikingly beautiful, petite lady. He said, quote, "No two finer people have ever graced this earth." That's bottom line in it right there. Pete's dad got him hooked on golf early, had him swinging a little Spalding golf club in the backyard when he was 5 years old. Neil, I know you love Springfield Country Club.
Yes.
Did you know Pete's dad, Paul Sr., was part of the committee that actually convinced Donald Ross to come to Springfield to design Springfield Country Club, which was completed in 1921, right before Pete was born. A little bit of foreshadowing there, considering that we will get into some extensive Ross influence on Pete. But Charlie, talk a little bit about how this idea of Ross coming to Springfield and Springfield Country Club in general kind of affected Pete's dad.
Sure, it's kind of a one thing leads to another situation in that Springfield, even after he got Ross to build it or helped convince Ross to build it, wasn't really close enough for him to get to, for him to drive to. It was 12 miles away, a whopping 12 miles, which maybe the roads were a little slower in the 1920s, I suppose. So Pete's dad, Paul Sr., persuaded his mom, Pete's grandmother, to release some of her acreage so that he could go ahead and design a 9-hole course for himself. This was Urbana Golf Club in 1922, 3 years before Pete was born. This is where Pete grew up, and this is where he learned the game. Some more foreshadowing for you. Paul Sr. had no formal training in golf course design or construction. He just went out there, started moving dirt, got some old Ford tractors with wide steel spikes. It took almost a full year, apparently, for Paul and his crew to rough out 6 of the holes on 60 acres. And they might have been moving slow, might have been busy selling drinks at the bar or doing post work or selling insurance. I'm not sure what was happening exactly at that time, but I see this, and Pete kind of frames it this way, as like follow by example, apple not falling far, dad's going out in the dirt and building this course. And 70 years later, in a kind of a heartwarming story, Pete's son PB came back and designed a second 9 at that course, which looks very charming today. It's still around Urbana. Pete compares it in the book to Olympic Club in Oakmont for its blind uphill shots, like severely sloping side hill stances, which I thought was interesting.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, couldn't get Donald Ross to come because he was too far away, so he builds his own 9 holes?
They did build the Ross course, which is Springfield, but it was after they built it, Paul Sr. said, that's kind of far away. Like, I want something next door.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So he helps get Springfield built. He's a member at Springfield?
I presume so. He might have been on the board, founding member, something of that nature.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And then he's like, too much. I'm not going to get as much golf, which I can relate to. I mean,
Of course.
Proximity of the course is probably a bigger factor in club selection than at least for your boy right now than anything else. Hard to pass up one in the backyard. That's good stuff.
100%.
Totally. So by the time Pete was 8 or 9, he was in charge of turning the sprinklers on and off at Urbana. Started to get a little responsibility creeping in. His dad, for better or worse, left him in charge of a beautiful bright red Fordson tractor just before World War II broke out, and Pete let his brother drive the tractor, who turned it over sideways in a ravine. They managed to rescue it before their dad got home. I'm, not sure that he ever found out about that one, but they, lived to tell the tale.
Which, based on some of the stories we're going to hear, I don't think I would want to flip Paul Sr.'s tractor. That would have been a scary proposition. He seemed like a serious cat. So World War II breaks out, and Pete's given a little bit more responsibility at this homemade golf course, Urbana, because all the other guys are shipped off to war, essentially. So when he's 15, he takes over the duties of greenskeeper at this kind of homemade golf course. And so early on, he's trying to put on these lessons that he's learned from the former greenskeeper and put them into practice. And he saw that the greens were getting a little brown one of the summers. And so he tries this mix of sulfate of ammonia and water to, as he says, quote, inject a hot dose of nitrogen onto the putting surfaces. And he was so stoked when this worked. And, he added it a little bit, and he saw that the green started to become a little bit darker green, and it was working. And so he just kept going and kept at. He's like, if this, made him a little more green, what would a little bit more do? And he says, unfortunately, I went a bit too far. The putting surfaces went from light green to medium green to dark green to black, and then a yellow straw that spelled disaster for me in the course. Charlie, I love the experimentation vibe. I think he's filing these lessons away for as he goes down the road.
Let's go find out. Let's go fuck around and find out. This reminded me of a quote from an interview on, I believe it was the Turf Today podcast with a superintendent at a Pete Dye golf course. which we'll get to. But the superintendent, Keith Christina, said essentially the reason that a bunch of younger people, younger superintendents call me and ask for advice is that I've killed more grass than they have. Like, I've figured out almost as many ways as possible to mess things up, and then I've not made that mistake again. And yeah, Pete kind of lived by that as well.
I mean, kind of a relatable thing. I feel like every young man has learned that more is not always better.
Sure.
I
Hard
think
lesson
we've all
to
learned
learn.
that maybe with alcohol, maybe with subwoofers in the back of your car. More bass is not always better. I learned that in high school. So this is just another example of that.
You got to know where the edge is. Otherwise, you got to know when you're going to cross.
But the key there, as Charlie said, don't make the same mistake twice.
Exactly.
So I struggle with that as well.
Pretty common during this time for famous golfers, big name golfers, to travel around the country and do these exhibition matches. Pro golf was not nearly what it is now, so they kind of had to supplement their incomes by doing like essentially what would be almost charity outing type things today. And so between tournaments, they'd visit these small towns, almost do these like barnstorming tours and visit a club and get paid to do it. And so one of the guys that actually came to Urbana was Walter Hagen.
I was gonna say it's got to be your boy.
Yeah, noted bum, as Wolfie called him. This speaks to his bum tendencies. I liked this. Pete said his dad, Paul Sr., he tried hard to reach Hagen, teach him a lesson in manners. Basically, like the gist was, it was customary to pay these guys like $500 for their to compete in these exhibitions at the courses, and then it was customary to give them a tip afterwards. And Pete said it would, my dad would not give a tip to Walter Hagen because the great golfer did not stand up when my mother entered the room. Love that. I love the example that we're setting. I don't know if it got through to the great bum Walter Hagen, but he's not for lack of trying. Paul Sr., this is another one. Taught Pete a good lesson. This is another one I think I will keep in my back pocket here. When Pete was 14, like I said, good player that we're going to get to in a second. Pete was playing in this Pro-Am and he was putting horribly. And so he had this wooden shafted putter and he got really pissed off and he hucked it up into a poplar tree. And he turns to his caddy and he says, "Go get that." And before the caddy can even take a step, he hears these stern words from behind him. It says, "You go get it," from his dad, who's on the sidelines watching this round of golf. And so Pete's kind of sheepish and he shimmies up the tree and gets the putter. And when he comes back down, he sees that both his dad and the golf clubs are gone. Like they've taken off. And so Pete goes to find his dad. Obviously he can't play in this tournament anymore. He goes to find his dad later that day and he sees him in his office and the clubs are sitting there and Pete asks, "Let me get the clubs back so I can go play." And his dad's like, "I paid for the clubs. You don't throw my clubs." And so he made Pete buy the clubs from him. And Pete learned the lesson, did not throw any clubs after that, which is good stuff.
I gotta say, at least he made the club throw count.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't hear a lot of guys getting clubs stuck in trees. I mean,
Is that-
if you're gonna do it,
Is that the lesson you're taking away from this one, Neil?
I mean, one of the lessons, yeah. Like I think, if you're gonna throw one, you shouldn't throw them. But if you're gonna, you gotta like throw it.
You got to make it worth it.
Send it.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't do it much. So you better make it count.
There's all kinds of, again, this is like Pete's book is just full of these little like parables, these little like Midwestern kind of folksy types of stories. It's great. So there's all kinds of little Pete-isms and die-isms that he lists out. I love the one, Charlie made sure, like I think it's like the first one listed. It's just like, if you're ever designing a hole, make sure the cart path goes on the right, because most women are right-handed golfers and they don't want you sitting in their cart looking at their butts while they're trying to hit. And it's just like it's just very practical, kind of common sense stuff like that I just love.
Which, after a while of wondering about where that came from, like speculating that maybe that was an Alice-ism, an Alice die-ism rather than a Pete die-ism, it got confirmed when I interviewed Abe Wilson, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, who worked on a number of Pete's crews over the years, shaping for him, that he was playing golf with them one day and he was standing behind Alice when she was hitting a tee shot. And I've got the quote written down somewhere, but Alice turned around and said to him, "Don't stand behind me when I hit. I don't want you looking at my butt while I'm hitting a golf ball." Abe was like, "Oh yes, of course. I'll go on the other side."
There's just all these little lines in there, like, when I traveled to Scotland, every course had railroad ties. I figured if it was good enough for Queen Anne, it was good enough for me. I like this one. I'm guilty of over tipping. This is just a list of like bullet pointed just quotes and like thoughts. I'm guilty of over tipping. I like to tip people who never get tips, like a girl at an ice cream counter. She's happy and the ice cream tastes better.
Hell yeah.
I don't.
I got a list like this. Don't trust someone that wears a bow tie exclusively. Be careful with people with 2 first names. I love this stuff.
Exactly. I don't know whether spineless golf shoes help protect the greens or not. I've always worn sneakers. It's just little stuff like that. It's really great.
He's kind of a walking dad joke in a lot of respects. Like he had a number of dogs over the years, Neil, and every dog was named 60. Someone told me that one of his dogs was named 57, but everyone else that I talked to said all of his dogs that they ever met were named 60. And the reason was the first dog he ever got, dog cost $20. And Pete was about to leave and said, actually, I need a collar as well. How much is the collar? $20. I need a leash too. How much is the leash? $20.
This dog cost 60.
Dog cost 60. Every dog thereafter just remained 60. Just kept the bit going throughout his life.
Love that.
Folks, quick break in the action here to tell you that the U.S. Women's Open presented by Ally heads to Southern California next week at the Riviera Country Club, where they're going to welcome the best players, Nelly Korda, Lydia Ko, Charlie Hull, battle it out for our national championship on NBC, USA Network, and Peacock June 4th through the 7th. If you want to be there in person, maybe you're in Southern California, maybe you want to take a trip to Southern California. Tickets are still available at uswomensopen.com/tickets. Plus, kids get in free with a ticket at adults. What a deal that is. Get out there. I can't think of a better place to go walk around, enjoy the weather, watch some golf, watch some great women's golf, watch a major championship on a great golf course. It's going to be an awesome week at the U.S. Women's Open. Cannot wait to watch next week. Let's get back to the program. So Pete had really bad allergies when he was a kid, and so him and his family started spending the winters down in Florida, Delray Beach. And while he was there, Neil, another kind of connection to your life, took lessons from the great man Tommy Armour, the OG,
Silver Scott.
Yeah, played some of the best golf of his life while he was in high school. I mentioned this earlier. I think this is one of the things that blew me away was as I was reading this book. I think I've always pictured Pete Dye, and this is my fault. Like I've always pictured him as like this kind of wily old grandfather, and he's got the old time cap, and he's standing there reading a set of plans on Whistling Straits or Kiowa or whatever. And I just had zero appreciation for what a good player he was. It was really impressive.
So did he play? He played competitively. Did he play in college?
Yes, he didn't graduate college, but he did. I believe he was the captain, which we'll get to. He was the captain of his college team. He won the individual title at the 1942 Ohio High School Golf Championship, which is a title that Jack held later. He considered turning pro, but in those days, you had to be finishing in the top 5 roughly to make a living at it. And he decided that his game wasn't at that level. He said that his long iron game didn't match up. But you'll like this, Neil. He was a hooker, hit his patented hooks in the center of the fairway.
Okay. Moving it right to left.
That's right. Also a bit of a rascal. Not a lot of clarity on why this happened, but he got sent to a prep school in Asheville to complete his final year of high school, which didn't go well. He said, much to my father's displeasure, all I did was play golf and have fun. Change of scenery had not triggered my concern for graduating. Which is a good line. So he ends up leaving school then and goes to enlist in the military. Again, World War II kind of in full force here. Desperately wants to be, like many people in this generation, wants to be sent to the fighting front. So he joined the parachute infantry because that was the most likely to get sent out to the front lines.
What year is this?
This is 45.
Okay,
right?
So right at the end of World War II.
Exactly. So before his unit gets sent out, essentially Truman drops the atomic bombs. War ends, and Pete is not sent out to the front. There is a good Charlie, if you remember the story from his parachute training, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, he just tosses this in like many other anecdotes, just real quick offhand. By the way, one time I was training, jumped out of a plane. My parachute got caught in a tree on the way down, and we were doing a night jump. And so he's just dangling from this tree, terrified, not sure how high he is off the ground. So he dangles all night, stressing out till finally the sun comes up and he realized that he was about 10 feet above the ground, and he just managed to get himself down to the mushy terrain.
So some good military connections here. So he was training at Fort Benning in Georgia, and he ended up winning the base tournament. You know, a lot of these like military base golf courses and stuff that are around, and he ends up meeting a couple like these golf crazy officers who learned about his background, like, oh, this guy can grow grass, he knows what he's doing, and so he gets asked to be the superintendent at the base course at Fort Benning. And another great story, he gets put in charge, by his words, he gets put in charge of all these Italian POWs who had been tasked with kind of being like golf course maintenance. You know, we've got all these guys, we don't know what to do with them, and so give them to Pete to take care of the golf course. And he said they're all super anxious to make a good impression so that they can stick in the U.S. after the war. They don't have to go back to kind of war torn Italy. And so he's like, they kept the golf course in immaculate condition. I mean, they're the best workers I ever had, which is a great story. There's another one that was a little.
These guys are cutting the grass by hand.
It's another one that was a little wilder when his brother Andy was graduating from prep school, also in Asheville, presumably the same school. Their dad insisted that Pete attend the graduation. So, like, you got to be there to celebrate your brother. And Pete didn't have any remaining leave time left with the military, so he ended up falsifying a pass to get off base and go to this celebration. And he ended up, I don't know if he was proud of, hey, look at me, I'm sticking to my commitments. But he tells his dad about the scheme, which also doesn't go great.
Big mistake. Paul Sr. decides, being apparently also a practical joker, Paul Sr. decides to tell a military policeman that his son had falsified his leave pass. Military policeman did not like that. And he got put in the brig for the last 60 days of his military career with a big P on the back of his uniform.
So then he was out there with the Italians.
He might have
Maybe.
Guys on the crew.
So Charlie kind of alluded to this earlier, but just a good bit of trivia. He went to high school, he went to college, and he ultimately went to law school, and he never finished any of them, which is pretty, like aspirational. I think that's kind of how my brain works as well. As I want to do all of these things, but I don't really want to finish them.
It's kind of like you and I learning like songs, D.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll learn like 80% of the song, and then I'm good.
As soon as you get to the bridge.
Where did he go to college?
He went down to Rollins, I think is where he ended up going. At least he was down in Rollins when Alice was there. We're going to get to that very shortly.
Okay, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're good. Sorry. Another good military base that's worth flagging. Some symbiosis with our guy Cody here a little bit. He was transferred to Fort Bragg before he got out of the military, and while he's there, he starts making these frequent trips to Pinehurst, right nearby, with some of the other kind of golf crazed Army captains. And Pinehurst obviously makes a massive impression on him, Charlie.
Yeah, the quote from the book directly from Pete is, "I was so enthralled with Mr. Ross's design that I convinced my fun-loving friend Jack Lear to let me ride with him in an old Ford 13 hours from Indianapolis to Pinehurst to play in the North and South Amateur." Jack, who, apropos of nothing, later had a habit of sleeping in a pen with his beloved pack of 17 gray Eastern Timberwolves, thought I was crazy when I made him stand and hold a measuring rod so I could look through a transit and record the contours on Mr. Ross's greens. He was studying up.
Yeah. So just this guy Jack that hangs with the Timberwolves. Is this where he ends up meeting Ross in person? Because he spent a little time talking to Donald Ross and picking his brain, which is, again, just a little bit like when we did the CB McDonald stuff and you had, this is the guy that actually worked with old Tom Morris talking to the guy who, is still alive today. Like, this is another one of those big bridge moments.
Yeah, it's not that long ago. It feels both like way, way back and also like, that's like one generational bridge.
Yeah. So Charlie mentioned this earlier, but ultimately his game wasn't quite good enough to want to turn pro, but he was a stud playing golf. He captained the college golf team. Like Charlie said, he was the 1958 Indiana State AM champion. He ended up reaching the third round of the British AM. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Qualified for 5 US AMs. 1957, he qualified for the US Open. He missed the cut, but he missed the cut by 2. But he liked to tell people that he tied Arnie and he beat a 17-year-old Jack Nicklaus that day. So it was, not a slouch on the golf course, which again, I think actually makes sense when you look at some of his golf courses where it's just like, no, just hit the shot. There's a little bit of Jack Nicklaus, like just hit a high fade. It's not that hard. But I think
Inverness, so kind of a local local U.S. Open for him too.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
Hometown wise.
Yeah, but I think it's important to think about him not turning pro. Charlie, you kind of raised this question, and I've been thinking about a lot as well. Is like if he's born into a different time, he might be. Maybe he catches the wide enough funnel that it's like, maybe I will try to go to pro. And then, I mean, think about how different the golf world looks.
Yeah, would he have been like a JT Poston level tour player or something like that, is what I wrote in the doc, like, which is maybe a strange, depressing thought to think about him not designing all these courses and impacting the world of design in the way that he did if he had been born into a different era.
Yeah. So after Fort Bragg, he leaves. He goes down to Rollins College, like I said, in Winter Park, Florida, former home of yours truly.
Okay, so he went high school, prep school, then he goes straight to the military. It wasn't college, so he gets the GI Bill, goes to college. Got
Correct.
it.
Yes.
Correct, which is about to be relevant here shortly.
So relevant. Neil, you're killing it.
While he's there, he meets a young woman from Indianapolis named Alice Holiday O'Neill. Good player in her own right, I think would be understatement of the century here. Pete, not shy with his words here in the book. Attracted to Alice right away, he wrote, quote, "Her perky smile and a great pair of legs certainly caught my attention." Almost blew up on the launch pad though. This is like almost dead before it started.
Okay, Neil. So speaking of the aforementioned GI Bill, Pete was caddying for Alice at an inter-sorority match, at Rollins in 1946.
Bring those back, by the way.
Sure.
When did those go away?
A collection of golfing nieces.
So Alice was favored in this match, which I imagine was not uncommon for her at that time and later. Pete decided to bet his GI Bill on the outcome of the match in Alice's favor. This was kind of in the courtship phase, the
Sure.
perky smile, great legs phase of their relationship, if you will. So he's caddying for Alice at the end of 18. Match was all square. On the first extra hole, Alice and her competitor both hit good drives. Alice's opponent hit her second shot into a greenside bunker. Doors open. Alice proceeds to top her second shot into a ditch about 70 yards ahead. Pete started panicking over his investment, so he raced up the fairway with the clubs to see if the ball was playable and found it nestled in some slimy green muck. This is where we start to question the great man's choices. He was pissed. He tossed her bag full of clubs into the muck and stomped off the course, leaving Alice to fend for herself. So needless to say, she was a little bit cold to our guy for the next few weeks.
God, he could have lost it all right there.
For sure.
Lost the GI Bill and the woman of his dreams.
Yeah, but he wins her back. I mean, think about how charming you got to be to win somebody back after doing that, which he ends up doing. So Alice graduates from Rollins in 1949, and she goes back to Indianapolis. And Pete, that's a great line. Pete called her he was still living in Florida at the time, and he called her and said, "I'm coming up to Indy to talk about marriage." And so Alice tells her parents, and they all get like prepared for this big proposal, because again, it's a big family in Indianapolis. Well-known family, and a big deal for their daughter to get married. And so everybody kind of starts setting the table. They're all ready for this big event to happen. When Pete gets to Indianapolis, he just started playing all this great golf. Like he loved playing golf. Alice loved playing golf. Probably very well-connected family in town, so they've got access to all these great courses and know all these great amateur players. And Pete just starts having the time of his life playing all this golf. And he says, "My scores in the high 60s quickly sidetracked any thoughts of marriage." Just again, not playing professionally. I'm just on a heater.
I'm on an absolute heater. Sounds like TC. Like, sorry guys, it was an emergency. I had to play.
And so the tension kind of starts to build, and Alice, and her parents are kind of waiting for him to pop the question. And so she finally front streets him and asks him what's going on. And he just straight face, he's like, we can't talk about this during golf season. I'm sorry. And so it's not till the following winter that Pete, as by his words, he finally comes to his senses. He proposes, and they end up getting married in a snowstorm on Groundhog Day, 1950. Great little detail there. And they would end up being married for 68 years. Built more than 100 golf courses together. I mean, the real number might be closer to like 200. It's a ton of golf courses. But I think this is the place to go a little deeper on Alice. Charlie, what, like, fill in the gaps a little bit.
Yeah, I've split up Alice's influence into 4 buckets, if you will, that we alluded to in the intro. And just now, she was an amazing player. Let's go straight in there with the golfing prowess. So she won the Indiana State Am 9 times. She won the North South. She competed on a winning Curtis Cup team and in several U.S. Women's Open. I think if she had been born later, she would have been like in the upper echelon of LPGA Tour players, just slaughtering amateur fields in Indianapolis throughout her life. Pete said that.
Sorry, I'm pausing on that for a second. I alluded to this a second ago, but it's going to be funny how much you hear that despite their golfing prowess, how much I feel like both of them were just like, how's the regular player going to play this? We got to leave more room here. We got to add another tee here. Like, it is commendable that, as good as both of them were, it's still, they still kind of had that in the back of their head as a designing principle.
Yeah, she was like a pioneer activist in that regard, especially in the domain of creating women's tees that were both at equitable yardages, but equitable angles being a key point that I don't think was she moved the Overton window certainly in her time with pushing Pete and pushing their courses to set up tee boxes that didn't require such outrageous forced carry shots, maybe off the tee, and allowed people to run the balls up to greens in as many cases as possible. She was, had a huge influence on Pete in a design capacity there. And yeah, to the earlier point as well about her being a great golfer, I think Pete said, I knew that as soon as I married her, I'd be the second best golfer in the family. There's no doubt about it. This brings to mind as an anecdote from Mark Shaw, who wrote the Bury Me with Pete. The first time that Mark ever played with the two of them, Mark was, I think, fresh off a college championship winning team, a Purdue team, young stud, feeling his oats, ready to take a little money off Pete and Alice, maybe, who were in their late 40s, I think, at this time. He thought about pitying them when he accepted a 25-cent wager from them. This nice lady, just who looked closer to his mother's age than anything. But he was like, whatever, it's okay. They'll be fine. They can handle it. I've read about their accolades. They know how to play. So Mark gets up to the first tee, stripes a drive. I think he said 265 down the middle, which was deep in those days. And Pete laces one of his hooks out over a pond into the center of the fairway.
Sloppy hooks.
Well back from Mark. And as they're walking to the forward tee after that laser of a drive, Pete says to a mutual friend, just loud enough, boy, Shaw must not be able to chip or putt. Otherwise I would have heard of him.
Great line. It's a good line.
And then Alice proceeds to stripe her drive down the middle and hole out for a 2 from the fairway and proceeds to win every hole off of Shaw for the entire round.
Oh, how'd that happen?
Oh, whammy.
Oops.
Yeah. Well,
that's incredible.
You mentioned the contributions to the design. I think a lot of people know this. 17 at Sawgrass, the best example. The Kiowa stuff that we'll talk about later, probably in episode 2, is very interesting. Is her idea to raise up those fairways so that you can actually see the ocean at Kiowa. Otherwise, you'd be sunk down too deep below the dunes and not really realize it, as she said, that you're playing right next to the ocean, which also made the golf course really hard for people who like to throw it up in the air. And you mentioned kind of the tee boxes and the angles and stuff like that for women too, as well. But what's kind of your third pillar?
Alice was well known for not pulling any punches. I think this was described most effectively in a fried egg video about Crooked Stick by Alan McCurrick, who worked on a lot of construction projects, a lot of courses with Pete. He said, say you're out on the site, you're working on the course. Pete's a pretty laid back guy, easy enough to be around him. You're with him all day, in the dirt with him. When Alice walked on the site, Neil, everybody straightened up.
Sure. She's an alpha.
Yeah. She said, I think the quote was, she could damn sure drop the hammer on you if things didn't look well or if they didn't fit her eye.
What the hell's going on with this bunker on 7? Who's working? Who's talking? Identify yourself.
Exactly. I love the there's a Tom Doak note in the book too about basically Tom conceded a point to Alice when they were building PGA West, and then Alice conceded a point to Tom, and Pete basically made the point to Tom Doak at the time. He said, "You're now 1 for 2 in arguments with my wife. I think that's an all-time record. You'd be wise to retire right now," which is good stuff. So just a lot of people speaking very, very highly and very reverentially of Alice and her work on site. But I think the last thing too, Charlie, is like they seemed, I'm saying this as somebody who obviously never met them, but they seem to just balance each other out really, really, really well in a pretty important way.
It was yin yang. It was good cop, bad cop. Pete was on the wackier, fantastical idea side, and Alice was fix it, down to earth. And I don't mean to give the impression that people that told me that she was an asshole or anything. People really enjoyed her company, and I don't think she was hard to be around at all. From what the 16 or 17 people I talked to said, she would just give it to you straight. You knew where you stood with her. Yeah, there are some good stories of wealthy developers, folks who hire them to design courses, who would bring Alice out onto the site. We'll get into some of these later, and ask her for her thoughts, and she would just,
this land sucks.
She'd be like, well, this is the worst. This is the worst opening hole I've ever seen in my life. She would just,
you want to do that? No, that's budget. We're not. That's not going to be good enough.
There's a good clip from Ron Whitten we'll play here, just talking about the dynamic a little bit.
Often when you would have a conversation with both Pete and Alice simultaneously, they would have tendencies to cut one another off. Can you fill out some of that for me? What was that like?
Yeah, everybody's probably experienced this, but I did quite a bit where Pete and Alice would talk to me at the same time, which reminded me of my parents. They would talk to me at the same time on 2 different conversations, oftentimes.
How do you decide who to reply to first if they're both talking to you at the same time?
I don't know that I ever got a word in edgewise. I can tell you they would always send me notes. Sometimes when I'd write something in Golf Digest, Alice wouldn't agree, and she'd write in Sharpie right on the page, what was wrong with it or that sort of thing. And Pete would, in Christmas cards, Alice would write her note on the Christmas card, and then Pete would add something on the back. It was all very touching because they took the time to think of me personally when they didn't need to. I was going to cover them for Golf Digest one way or the other, but we just developed a friendship.
What's an example of something that Alice wrote in Sharpie on a page and sent back to you?
Oh man, there was one time when Jerry Tardy commissioned, I can't even remember the writer now, but he was a writer that did the stuff for like Rolling Stone and Vogue magazine and stuff. He was a pretty controversial writer, I should say, and he did a piece on the Dye family, and the arc of it had Alice in pearls with a bolero of bullets, like she was some sort of defender of her family. And Alice said, "Tell Jerry I don't like this one bit." Jerry Tardy being our boss, my boss, the editor of Golf Digest.
There you go. There's a million stories.
A couple there though, like the first anecdote around, you always know you're at like the right table when you have multiple conversations that break out. Like when you're at a dinner with friends, and it's like, because everybody's so comfortable, so it's just like, oh my god, all right, we need to unite the conversations. But it's like I see that as a good thing, that like that's a lively table to be sitting at. That's good stuff.
100%. Moving into kind of adulthood here. So Pete and Alice are married. Pete's not going to become a pro golfer, so he needs to come up with a career, and he decides to get into life insurance. Becomes a salesman with Connecticut Mutual. Plenty of people in golf getting into insurance. We know that.
He's going to work the cocktail tour.
He's going to work the cocktail tour, and he's going to work the hospitals. He talks about how he gets deep in it with young doctors, and how many nights he would spend at the Indiana University Medical Center just talking insurance with resident physicians. But time's a flat circle, same as it ever ever was. His ability to play golf, like, pretty directly correlated with his ability to sell insurance on the golf course, right? And so,
Well, I was saying he's gonna get on the cocktail circuit of like these high-end mid-am, the Gasparillas of the world.
sure,
You know, he's gonna go to, yeah, I'm gonna keep beating up the North South. Why not?
he does continue to play a lot of amateur golf in this stage, but I think it's a lot of like client golf. You know, just
Yeah.
like, watch me hit this big hook. You don't think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to insurance?
Yeah.
And he does really well. He says during his second year of employment, he became part of the $1 Million Roundtable, which you would presume means he sold $1 million worth of insurance that year. A lot of money in 1950. Alice also working for Connecticut Mutual, selling insurance at the time here. Also quite successful. In a short tenure, she sold more than $250,000 worth of insurance, which was big achievement for a woman in the workplace, certainly during those days. But this is not really scratching the itch, Charlie. This is not what our two golfing heroes are looking to be doing with their time.
Yeah, Neil, he got home when he was 30 in 1955 after about 5 years on the job and said, "That's it. Let's get out of insurance, start building golf courses." Pete's boss at the time apparently wasn't too happy about this, sent him a note suggesting that he seek psychiatric help.
Which is pretty understandable. You're just killing it in this business. And there was talk in the book about how he was asked to take over the company. And it's like, no, I'm actually just going to go build golf courses instead. Is like, it's a jarring visual when you actually stop to think about it. But,
Love a big career pivot
right?
like that. That's inspiring stuff. I just can't sell these term life policies anymore.
Charlie, did you get a sense of like what the breaking point was? Like what was the enough is enough sort of moment?
I think a lot of it comes back to his early days turning sprinklers on and off when he was 8 or 9 years old at Urbana. There was something planted in there in those formative years. So like in the early 50s, he was on the Country Club of Indianapolis Greens Committee. The course had been through some rough times apparently, and he asked to be on the committee, and so they allowed him on, and they may have come to regret that decision. Later, they didn't know how much. He says the quote is, "It took a while for them to realize how much of a disaster it would be that they let him into the boys' club." So the club at the time had what he calls some of the finest players of the day as part of their membership, who, quote, "remember me as the man who single-handedly annihilated their golf course." Pete had studied. We know that he didn't graduate from any university, but he studied turf management, took some classes with a few professors and academic doctors at Purdue, went to superintendents meetings in the area to learn some techniques, got a little dangerous, emboldened.
I like Cody.
Yeah. Just diving in, trying to lifelong
turf
learning.
head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he started tinkering, started experimenting with some of this new knowledge, tried out some chemical mixes on the fairways at the country club, didn't get the ratios quite right, caused the course to lose a little grass. So the quote is that he caused the course to lose the little grass it once possessed.
Yeah, so he gets on the board with Country Club of Indianapolis, and I think it just has a lot of fun tinkering around with this stuff and working on the land and thinking about the holes, and I think that like gets into him and kind of makes them want to jump ship. There's another story in there where they needed to replace this like shaky old wooden bridge that they had on the second hole out there, and so he's like, I got this idea. I'll, like, leave it to me. I got it. And so his idea,
I'll build it.
Yeah, his idea was to construct this concrete bridge that was going to be there for eternity. He called it, quote, a lifetime bridge. And so he did all this research. He was like, I got it. I know exactly what we need to do. He built the bridge. He was so proud of it that he carved his initials in it and the date. And the next spring, the first time it rained, Pete got a frantic call from the course superintendent that said that his lifetime bridge had not made it through the first spring rainstorm. As it turned out, as well constructed as it may have been, he built it on top of quicksand. And as soon as the rain came, it just the entire
foundation,
entire bridge washed away. Everything disappeared. And so it's just, there's some really good stuff about all these like disasters that are going on at this country club in Indianapolis, which like really lingered with him. You could tell
he wasn't in the $1 Million Club of designing courses at that point, but still it clearly got the juices going enough enough for him to jump ship from insurance land.
I love that he said at one point during the 60s where he's afraid to come to the door because he was afraid it was going to be somebody from the Country Club Indianapolis membership who was going to tell him about something that he messed up, which was great. But so by the time they kind of, we touched on this earlier, Neil, you said this in your eloquent open, but by the time that Pete and Alice are like, we're going to become golf course architects, we're kind of in this in-between period. Like a lot of the golden age guys have passed away. And in the 1950s, it's pretty much like Robert Trent Jones, Dick Wilson, and Ellis Maples are the big names, with Robert Trent Jones far and away the superstar of that group.
Yeah, maybe throw like a Willard Bird in there.
Sure. Yeah,
down in the South.
exactly.
I don't know if my guy Hal Purdy's bouncing around yet, but he could be.
He might be. But RTJ becomes like the benchmark of that time period, and the guy who Pete's later going to compare himself against and also violently contrast himself against, which we'll hear about.
Tweed.
Yeah. And so Pete and Alice, like we've mentioned, they receive all this publicity for their playing exploits. There's great stuff about how often Alice is on the cover of the newspaper and all this stuff. Everybody knows her as this really good player, but that's not really helping them convince anybody like, oh no, we can build golf courses too. That's still a little bit of a bridge too far. And so they go to the man himself, Robert Trent Jones, and they ask to be employed as designers. And so he offers them these management positions, but he's like, yeah, you're not doing actual work, like out in the field doing actual stuff. And this is not interesting to them. So they visited another architect, this guy, Bill Didell, kind of gives him a bunch of horror stories, and he was less than encouraging.
Real pessimist.
Yeah. So the way they describe it, they're kind of all dressed up with nowhere to go. But after a couple false starts, there's two contractors that are finally willing to, it's like that scene in Tommy Boy, let me say maybe. There's these two contractors, Bill and Henry Nordseek, who finally, they call Pete and Alice in the summer of 1959, and they say, we need a golf course on this plot of land just south of Indianapolis. And to this day, Pete, he writes, to this day, I can't remember whether or not we even got a fee. I would have paid the Nordseeks for the opportunity to do it. And this is, it's a while after they started, Charlie. It's like, not like this is like when you really, time can kind of like compress when you start looking at it in a book or something, but it's like 5 years after they kind of make this switch.
Yeah, this struck me in their all dressed up with nowhere to go phase was about 4 years long. They're just looking for jobs. It's not clear to me exactly when they stopped taking salaries. Worth mentioning, you alluded to it earlier, DJ, that Alice's family came from money. She had a maid and a butler growing up, so there could have been some support there. I think Pete said that her parents helped him out a bit. He still had was coasting on some royalties, had some insurance premiums, little passive income going, but they were grinding, putting ads in the newspaper, looking for work for a little while into their mid-30s.
Well, also interesting that nowadays it feels like one spouse takes the big risk and the other one keeps the steady job. It's very unique to see. It's like, no, we're going to run this business together and we're both going to jump ship together. Is a shout out to the Dyes, because that takes some guts.
Yeah. So the first course that Pete and Alice did was a place called El Dorado on the south side of Indianapolis, now called Dyes Walk. This doesn't count as one of our 10. This is biographical information. And so same as Ross, McKenzie, McDonald, Rayner, all these guys, they didn't have any training in this. They weren't building it with any plans. They were just using kind of the memories of their favorite courses in the U.S. The stuff that they liked is what they were going to use as their inspiration to lay this out. And so it's a great story. Pete sent these samples like dirt and peat, like PEAT, off to this lab at Texas A&M to basically tell me what I got and tell me how much stuff I need to build a golf course that's like this. And the lab looks at it and they say, oh, you need this much, and he orders it up. And he orders all this without knowing how much space 3,000 cubic yards of material is going to take up. And so he just sees this line of dump trucks just barreling down at him, coming down the highway. Has no idea where he's going to put all this stuff. He said it all creates a pile that was 100 feet long, 60 feet wide, 30 feet high. That was going to be his shaping mix, his greens mix, all of that stuff. And then the Texas A&M folks also admitted, like, we're sending you a bunch of different stuff, but we've only had small amounts of like the examples that you sent. So we don't know what the ratio is to mix all this stuff together. Like you're gonna have to figure that out yourself, which is another adventure in its own right.
I'm picturing Pete calling them up and then being like, "You ordered how much of those materials we told you about? Like we just, we just experimented with 6 ounces. Here, you got thousands of pounds." Neil, there was no large machinery to handle the mixing and distribution of this giant pile. They got out over their skis a little bit, so they did what one does. They strung up some lights in the barn and they pretty much did it by hand. They used the ratios. They were like, we're just going to eyeball this. We're going to get it as close as we can. And they
And what is this like? Is this ratios of sand and soil or chemicals? Like what are we talking about?
Sand and soil and peat and stuff like that. That's going to kind of make up like the soil to shape.
Basically like the divot mix.
Essentially. Yeah. Essentially.
But just like just a whole boatload of that.
Yeah. But I think that they had some bumps along the way, but the biggest problem with El Dorado might have been the routing. He tells a great story with in the podcast with Eric Anders Lang here.
We thought we'd build Oakmont, but not quite. But after we finished it, Alice made a nice map showing the golf course, and she sent it to all her friends and sent one to Richard Tufts. And Mr. Tufts owned Pinehurst, or was a big owner of Pinehurst, and he was past president of the United States Golf Association. So he wrote back and said it was wonderful for us kids to build this 9-hole course. But he said, don't you think crossing the creek 13 times at a 9-hole course is just a little too much?
I love that.
It's a little excessive, isn't it?
It seems like
also love that you kids. It's like, don't they like 34?
It's true. Yeah. I just love like everything I was saying about the they're thinking about the the higher handicap player. Like I think they did have to learn.
Not yet.
They did have to
they
learn
get
that.
there, but at first it's like, nah, they weren't thinking about anything.
Yeah.
Thinking about finishing the job.
So they're going along. They're doing a good job until 1963 when Pete was 38, and him and Alice took a very formative trip to Scotland. This is going to end up sounding like everybody who's ever taken a trip to Scotland, right? Everything I thought I knew about golf, it all changed once I arrived there. But it's his first time over there. He mentioned Richard Tufts, who was the former USGA president, grandson of James Walker Tufts, who was the guy who founded Pinehurst. He was the guy that convinced him to go over to Great Britain. And Pete received an odd welcome when he got to Scotland. When he got to the Prestwick airport, he was detained in an interrogation room, questioned vigorously by the authorities. Would you like to venture a guess why?
Wow, God, if it was Australia, it would be because he had soil with him.
It would have, yeah,
like that.
Would have been a
they
good
don't
guess.
like that down under. I don't know.
No, this was because his suitcase was full of women's underwear, and the reason for that was Pete and Alice had traveled separately because of something to do with scheduling and taking care of their 2 young kids at home, and so Pete ended up grabbing Alice's suitcase, and Alice had Pete's suitcase, and Pete had this suitcase that was all full of women's clothes and underwear and all kinds of stuff. And I don't have to dig into what the charge would be, but they did not like that.
What's your deal, man?
Yeah, fucking weirdo. What are you doing? Yeah, and so they would not. They weren't satisfied with Pete's explanation until Alice arrived later and corroborated the story. But
I like to imagine that there's a file somewhere in Scottish passport control from 1963 saying like Pete Dye, possible underwear smuggler.
No, it'd be Paul Dye.
Paul Dye. Excuse me. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah. So this is, like I said, I mean, this is kind of this is the whirlwind tour of the British Isles that just makes the light bulb go off for these guys. And
God, I can just see the Tufts guy being like, "Hey kid, you got to you need to get your ass across the pond.
Yeah.
You're trying to design golf courses. Come on, man." That's good. That's good stuff.
Neil, this turned into what I'm thinking of as his Steve Jobs goes to Xerox moment, where he gets a look in the R&D lab, sees, clickable mouse. That's an interesting idea. Might want to
gooey.
I want to take a look at that. Maybe pull that back across the pond and utilize some of those techniques. Shane Ryan made a wonderful podcast about Pete and compared it to an American painter visiting Europe for the first time, which is possibly more apt. But I like this. I like this cunning poacher analogy.
So there's like of the 30 plus golf courses they saw, he shouts out 5 of them specifically: Turnberry, this is the most imposing golf course I've ever seen. I love, this is going to come up a million times, but he's struck by all the different grasses on the golf course. You know, multiple shades of green dotting the fairway. The rough's a different grass. The approaches to the green are different grass. He said it causes the golf course to appear even more undulating than it really was. This is going to become something that you just constantly hear in his golf courses, is like different grasses, different colors, different textures. Make this thing look three-dimensional. Like that all goes into some of the visual, you know, both aesthetic beauty and the trickeration that Pete's trying to employ.
And we're probably in what, like late 1950s at this point?
This is 63.
Okay, so even early 60s. So I got to think at this point, not a ton of imagery other than maybe photography of these courses over there.
Right.
So like even the way, like, Deej, you and I were just in Liverpool and we went to 3 open rota courses that I know the names of. I could tell you a little bit about each of them, but there's just no replacement for being like the getting on site and be like, wow, Lytham is so different than Birkdale.
100%.
You know, and for years it's been like, oh yeah, they're all links golf. It's like, no, they're not.
Right.
And I can only imagine that, you know, that's exponentially more true for Pete and Alice Dye at this point.
100%. And like the little tiny details too, right? Is like Prestwick's the next place he shouts out. And what does he like there? The railroad ties. You know, he sees railroad ties there, which Prestwick famously running right next to the rail line. So that was like very utilitarian for them. When they needed to replace the railroad ties, they kind of threw them up from the tracks and they said, we got all these railroad ties. What can we do? Oh, if we use these, you know, it's going to stop the bunkers from washing away, you know.
That's like Karn reusing
Yeah.
the you know, kids soccer pitch AstroTurf for their you know, walkways.
Yeah. So there's like a great thing about, you know, he loves that at Prestwick, is not only is it going to be this crazy good striking visual thing, but it's also like, oh wow, we can save some dough. This can help keep things in place. So railroad ties obviously will become a big theme for him. Carnoustie, I love, Charlie, the story about Carnoustie that he shares about Nicholas.
This is really telling that Pete includes this anecdote specifically. The story is that Mr. Nicholas played Carnoustie and was upset that his drives to the right side of the 9th fairway always ended up with a downhill lie. There's OB left on that hole. It's a 470-yard par 4. So Jack complains to Carnoustie, as maybe a pretty American thing to do, complains to the governing body, and they, quote, listened very carefully to his complaints. Jack, according to Pete, was certain that the next time he came back, the situation would have been dealt with. So when he returned on that downhill lie, they placed a steep pot bunker and called it Jack Nicklaus.
Which is good stuff. Yeah.
Can you believe this?
Yeah.
Also, Jack, I got to think that they want you challenging the OB.
I think that's
to get
the idea.
Better lie. If you care about it, you got to take on the trouble, brother.
Exactly. Which I think is going to become a pretty good through line, because we're going to see a couple instances where he goes, oh, interesting suggestion, and then completely steers in the opposite direction. Which is
100%.
Which is great.
Also, to piggyback on the utilitarianism, just briefly, DJ, too, Pete was a proper utilitarian. Like this was not a materialistic fellow, Neil. We'll get into some of this later, but unpretentious dresser, dirty boots, khakis, same starched white shirt, collar, same thing every day. You know, keep the uniform simple. No flashy cars, never owned a car. We'll get into more of that later. Went to Dairy Queen for his anniversary with Alice. Like, not a materialist guy.
It's another TCism.
Deej, I mean, we've discussed this. If you and I ever cash out, I mean, what am I buying? I'm buying maybe a drum set like you got in the background there, Charlie, and some nice underwear and some nice socks, man. And
call it a day.
I'm probably living.
Yeah. You guys going public or something?
No, I'm not. But if I did, you know, you try to think about it, I'm like, I don't know if I want a bunch of stuff. Pete sounds like my kind of guy.
He shouted out Royal Dornick, which we actually might be playing right now as you're listening to this episode, which is interesting. We're going there.
Might be on this Scottish walkabout as you're listening to this.
I love this story. He says when he got to Dornick, there were 2 women in long pleated skirts that were about to tee off. And so Pete, you know, he's all aggrieved. He's like, I don't want to get stuck behind these 2 ladies. Come on, we got to go. We got to go. Alice is off taking photos of the clubhouse and the golf course. She's not anywhere to be found. So these ladies tee off right in front of him. And Pete's just like, he's hurrying on every shot. He's like, we got to play through these ladies. Come on. We got to go. And when they were walking off the second green, Alice essentially paraphrasing, told him to chill the fuck out and to look over, and they could see that the two ladies were now on number 7 as they were walking off of the second green. And he said that was my that was my introduction to just how quickly the Scots play the game. Alice is still making fun of him later that night for his chauvinistic behavior, which was great. But another good like very practical point of influence, I think, at Royal Dornick, which I can't wait to look for when I'm there. Charlie, basically, like the way he treats kind of the eye level of greens is something that kept popping up.
Neil, I think about this as kind of a, if you trim your bushes, it'll make your deck look bigger situation.
Sure.
Like, we're on the level with the green from the fairway. Let's dig a little earth out in front of the green, make it look elevated. It's not elevated, but it appears that way.
You know, I got a little bit of this from Tom Doak when we were at Pinehurst number 10, when Ben and I were out there, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And he was talking just about what he learned from Pete Dye on how to use very specific trees to create visual deception. Same kind of idea of like using distance and be like, how far, really messing with people on how far away something is, or making something look bigger or smaller, based on like whether it's digging, elevating, or like using landmarks for that stuff.
I just love it. We're gonna hear some of this when we talk about the golf club as well. But this idea that like, what would it take to push these, like, obviously we want to push up these greens and we want to make it more difficult and more demanding and add more dimension. And it's like, oh man, that's going to take a lot of dirt. That's going to take a lot of work. That's going to take a lot of this, that, and the other thing. Like, what if we just dug a big trench and, just dig out in front of the green so it looks like it's up, and then they might hit it over the back. Who knows? Yeah.
Like, what if we just like make it look like we did that, and but we didn't really do it.
It's great. So that's just one of those very crystal clear. Like, you always hear, oh, Pete Dye, visual deception. It's like, well, what does that mean? What are you talking about? It's like, that's just a very concrete
I think the best example, and I think Donald Ross does this a good amount too. Maybe I'm not an architecture expert, but the bunker that is 40 yards short of the green.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
That, if done properly, makes it look like that's a greenside bunker. And I've been fooled by that so many times on a Pete Dye course where I'm like, oh, I got to carry that bunker. And it's like, no, that bunker's not really like even a factor.
Especially in the days of, before rangefinders and before.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, even more important. And that's just, and again, that's like, I remember Doak saying some of that of like, yeah, if I lower the fairway to make it so you can't see over that bunker, it looks like it's greenside from 150 yards out, but it's not. You got like 20 yards in between there and the front of the green.
Exactly. Finally, the course, the course he was there to play was the Old Course. He was there for the British Am. You can count him in the group, Charlie, of people not exactly enamored with the Old Course first time around.
Really?
Shout out to Bob Mack. Yeah, he just laid into it, Neil. He described it to, what did he say? An astonished Scottish reporter called it a goat ranch. He said if I played it 1,000 times, it would still be a goat ranch. Just the belligerent Yankee, just, coming
Love to know
over
what he shot. If Pete's one of those guys, if he's a Solly, like, yeah, I just didn't think that course was great. It's like, what'd you shoot, Solly?
Well, he did pretty good. He moved on in the British Am, and so he got to play it a bunch more times, and he would end up walking this back pretty quickly. Him and Alice were just totally struck by the vastness of it, the flatness, but it's not really flat, the definitions between the gorse and the pot bunkers and the way that the
wind changed,
the wind, all of that stuff. He ended up by the end of that trip calling it golf course design in its purest form, and said that the road hole may well be the very best par 4 in the world. Shout out to Bob Mack, like you said, Charlie. I fucking love this. This is how, and Charlie, I think, has the details. This is how enamored he was by the 17th green when they got there.
He and Alice rented a tripod in order to measure the dimensions of the green. They were surprised to learn after actually getting the gear out and taking the measurements that the road hole green is a perfect rectangle despite appearing as an oval from the fairway. And he went as far later on as suggesting to Walt Disney that they attempt to recreate the whole stateside, like note for note, but Walt passed away before they could follow through on that one.
And I'm guessing maybe the Old Course Hotel had not been built by this point.
I think it would have been there.
Right, 63.
I actually don't know. It's a good question. I don't know when that actually was built. Good question.
I'd love to get his thoughts on that.
Well, that's kind of the end of the aggressive biography section there. So we can move through some of the courses. And I think the first one that we're going to get to is Crooked Stick. Charlie, why is this the first one? Why is this on the list?
Crooked Stick, Carmel, Indiana, built from 1964 to 1967.
Caramel, Indiana, or Carmel. They're gonna get. They're
Terry,
gonna
Terry Hate,
they're
Terry
gonna,
Hot.
they're gonna get on you for
Come
that
on.
one. Not
Did I hit you with a
Carmel.
Carmel?
You did.
God,
Watch yourself.
straight to jail.
Yeah.
I'm not even from California.
Right up the road from Terry Hot.
Now, see, Terre Haute, I don't have a problem with the French pronunciations, but yeah, they'll probably kill me for that one too. Okay. Somewhere in Indiana, they built a golf course in the mid 60s. This was not the first course that they built. We established that El Dorado, they're crossing the creek 13 times in 9 holes, was the first, but they considered this course their firstborn. Pete and Alice did. It was
Interesting. I thought the golf club was.
Right after that.
Okay. All right.
It's coming.
That's good to know.
Same period of time. The golf club, capital T,
The
capital
golf
G, capital,
club,
capital
sorry.
C, yeah.
Not the golf course.
Course is considered to be their coming out party. It's distinctive because they initiated it. They found the funding. They found the land. Pete knocked on doors. He kissed babies. He figured out how to get this property. He brought some early members in. This was their project and their course, like from ground zero.
Charlie, for our song comp section, he this is how he described. He said something to connote a major coming out party, arriving on the scene, no outside developers, indie label, not major. I don't know. I don't have a lot of deep cuts on here. I put About a Girl from the Nirvana's first record. You know, I think
Generation, kind of a new genre.
Yeah, I think 1991, you know, PJ Championship was doing a lot of heavy lifting, right? Like we're setting the table so that in 1991 we've got a full takeover.
Well, no, but
and
you've
this
also
is
got like the Jones Family just playing
Yeah.
the 80s arena stuff. and here comes this
Def
small
Leppard.
outfit. Like, yeah, what's this grunge thing?
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's kind of based on punk, and it's kind of
And then Spawns, I like this. Spawns, you know, Tom Doak is Dave Grohl,
Sure.
you know, goes on to do his own thing for years and years. Like just a lot of offshoots to this.
Doak wasn't on this course, but yes.
Yeah,
I love
But
it.
you get the point.
Yeah,
I know. I love it.
Yeah, I like it. Should we talk about the name? I feel like that's we got to start there, right, Charlie?
Sure. It turns out that naming a golf course isn't always the easiest thing to come up with. There's some funny stories in the book. Some of these courses that we'll go through, sometimes it's a lightning bolt of inspiration. Sometimes there are some less than ideal suggestions thrown out there. Pete wanted to call this course the Muir of Ord, which means fields of gold, which was inspired by the name of a James Braid course. Scotland really rolls off the tongue for those Indianans
In Carmel.
and I can't even bring. I'm afraid, like you, Neil, of this pronunciation now.
Sorry to hear
Welcome to the
footsteps.
party, pal.
Yeah, oh boy, I got all those Hawaiian pronunciations dialed, but Carmel, Indiana,
I've been
somehow.
canceled on pronunciation so many times. It's like you know, quadruple jeopardy. You can't put me in jail anymore, guys.
Like Andrew Tate. Just
Tried
can't,
and convicted.
can't cancel him anymore.
Can't do it. I'm post cancel on pronunciation.
We're an hour and 21 minutes in. We got our first Andrew Tate mention.
Yeah.
Take my blood, okay?
It's back to Carmel. Charter member Bill Wick of Crooked Stick saw Pete walking around in 1966 with this knobby crooked stick and said, "How about that? You look like an old Scottish shepherd, Pete. What if we call it Crooked Stick?"
There you go.
And he's walking around with that almost just like stick he picked up, like pointing out, we want this, like just building it in the moment, kind of.
Just swatting a stone with it. Yeah, just casual.
You kind of alluded to the origin story when Pete got back from Scotland. They started putting together this group. Let's just go knock on doors. Let's try to find some land to build. We're going to build the finest club in all the land type of endeavor. Great one worth mentioning. He goes to the door of this what he calls a cagey lady named May Kearns. And he says he just goes toe to toe with her, glass for glass, on elderberry wine until he gets so drunk that he ends up paying double what the land is worth in order to buy her land for $1,200 an acre, which is good stuff. A lot of just, you know, things that are like, I think what makes like a good kind of Midwestern storyteller is like, it kind of doesn't matter if it's true or not. You know, it's like, it's directionally it's true,
Yeah.
but some of the details might be a little fudged, but I like that.
When Pete had to step down from the board later on, or the membership board of directors or whatever it was, they wrote this whole missive that was tongue in cheek and funny, thanking him. And they did reference him paying no more than twice what the land was worth to build the course after getting drunk under the table by our cagey lady. So it may have happened.
Another good one. He says he's got this pile of money that's reserved for a full coat for or a fur coat for Alice, and instead he buys an old used Caterpillar D2 bulldozer, gets all this all this fill dirt delivered to the front door, and he just front yard of his house here in Indianapolis, and he starts just getting on the bulldozer and practicing and figuring out how to make stuff, and that's just how he's figuring out how to build this place.
What do you think, hon?
And so eventually he ends up getting this big 400-acre plot to build this place. We kind of alluded to this earlier too, Charlie, but surely they must be going off some plans here. Is that the premise?
Well, according to Chris Worthwine, a historian on this excellent fried egg video about Crooked Stick, he said that somebody made a drawing for the course plans, but Pete claimed that he hadn't actually drawn it, and neither had Alice. So it's unclear to me who made this drawing, but there was a drawing made by someone that was used to raise money. And then
I was going to say you had to have it for the marketing packet, right? To get you got to have a visual
for the bank,
for the loan
investment thesis. Yeah,
for the loan.
Yeah,
that was it Dean Beeman that had that same story? I think about
same
Sawgrass.
story. I've heard this Command C, Command V story on almost all of these 10 courses. Like, yeah, you had to go to the bank with something. So somebody made something. I don't think it was Pete. And then, we got the money and he just threw away the plans and built the course.
I think it was, Sawgrass specifically. I remember him, I think it was Dean Beeman telling the story where they were walking out of the meeting. He goes, all right, well, you can throw those plans away. We're good now. It's just great. But to give you a little sense of the finances for this specific project, they started by building the back nine first, and that's because there was wheat growing on the front nine. And so it wasn't harvest time yet, so they couldn't plow all the wheat under. They had to leave that alone so that they could build the back nine because they needed the money from selling the wheat in order to keep the whole project going. And that was in 1964 that they built the back nine. The first thing he did was just built a big ass lake, which is another thing that I think is going to end up being a pretty repeatable, kind of first
it's
move.
So pragmatic. Even I know that it's like, oh, you need dirt. Yeah, why don't we just dig a big ass hole first, and we can just use that as a center of gravity, as a mine for us.
You will be seeing more of that, Neil, in the ensuing 9 courses. And as a result of this harvest time gap between the two nines, they ended up with some different design influences. Pete was looking at, before building the back, he was spending time on some Mackenzie and Perry Maxwell courses. Big Mackenzie guy, by the way, had his architecture book and scribbled in the front of Pete's copy of Mackenzie's book, $500 reward if found. Like, he had all kinds of notes in the margins there. So green on 14 at Crooked Stick, for example, is an inverse version of the number 13 green at Crystal Downs, Perry Maxwell course, with a front tier falling away at the back. But then before building the front, he had been spending time with Ross and Tillinghast. So you see a lot more of their influences in the greens on the front nine, according to Tom Doak. He goes through some of this in detail on that fried egg video, which is interesting. So you end up with a little bit of a smorgasbord of different ideas, which is not the first time that's going to happen on a P-tie course either.
And let me ask this. It seems like a student, a natural curious about the history of golf course architecture, does his pilgrimage over to Scotland, clearly is reading all the literature he can get his hands on of these famous Golden Age architects, but he doesn't seem like, I can't think of a lot of Pete Dye templates. Like, he's looking to make his own holes, right? She's not trying to, am I wrong about that? Or are there template holes from Pete Dye?
He was a big Redan fan. And so he has a few instances of Redans. I don't know how many of the other templates he might have implemented. He certainly used elements. There's an interesting Alpsy kind of hole at Long Cove that we'll get into.
I know that hole. I know exactly what hole you're talking about.
That's an interesting hole. And from the old course, Pete's famous for his 17th holes in whatever shape they take, usually some sort of horrifying par 3 forced carry. He was just inspired by the difficulty of the road hole. I don't know that he built strict road holes to your point.
The thing, and I think this ties back to Crooked Stick too, is Neil, at least in my reading about it, I feel like it's less, let's Command C, Command V this specific hole into a bunch of places. And it's more like the philosophies, in particular, like the closing holes. I mean, he talks about this at Crooked Stick where it's like, we're going to go, I want you showing up, paraphrasing, I want you showing up on property. And even if you par the first, you're worried about what you're going to do on 16, 17, and 18. And you think about Sawgrass, you think about Kiowa, you think about Harbor Town, you think about like some of these places where it's like, yeah, that's great that you made a birdie on 5, but like, I'm going to punch you in the face at 3:00 p.m. And I need you to be thinking about 3:00 p.m. all day. And he kind of does that at Crooked Stick as well, right? With 16, the tough par 4, 17, the long par 3, and 18, kind of a ball buster as well. And so it's kind of those philosophies that I feel like we keep seeing over and over. I think on that same note, honestly, like one of the things we kind of skipped through in the intro was like, he was obsessed with this idea of cadence and tempo. And Charlie, I think you can probably speak to that a little better than I can.
Yeah, we're talking about music. We're talking about 10 songs. He was a big cadence guy. Davis Love III talked to me about this. A number of people expressed a similar thing. He talks about it in the book. You know, if I'm gonna hit you back to back to back with a long demanding par 4, long par 3 with a difficult mid to long iron shot, and a tough par 5, I'm going to follow that up with a comfier par 4, with a shorter par 4. Like, he's not trying to get you all at once. He's trying to build to this crescendo that DJ eloquently described a minute ago. So there's always this give and take back and forth. And
I think a give and take on shot shapes, right? Like that's the other thing is you're going to see constantly. I mean, everybody always talks about Sawgrass again as a perfect example of this, but number 1, you're hitting a draw off the tee, you're hitting a cut into the green, or vice versa, I guess. And the number 2, you're hitting a draw off the tee and a cut into the green. And like, it's just this constant, like, can you do both? Can you do this? Can you do that? Sort of mix is kind of the way to score, the way to play.
And that makes sense knowing now that he was such a good golfer.
Right.
It's like he's definitely, the feeling I get is it's less options with Pete Dye, and it's more like, I need you to execute this right now. Like, he's messing with your eyes, but it's kind of clear what you have to do when you're standing on the tee. It's like, okay, this hazard's all down the left and this hole is bending. Like, you've got to decide. You do have to make a decision, but there is usually there's a specific answer, I think, to what he's trying to get you to do on a lot of his harder holes.
Yeah, which I think is, Charlie had kind of a criticisms section later, but I mean, that's kind of hitting on it specifically, is like, if you wanted to zoom in and critique something, it's like, that is kind of the way to play in a lot of ways, where there's usually 2 shots, like the right one and a safe one if you're trying to bail.
Yeah.
But the right one is usually the right one. It's not like, oh, there's 15 different right shots that I could hit here. Obviously there's exceptions to that, but I think like large scale, that would be, if you were looking for a criticism, probably one of them.
I'm projecting here, but I sense because of his good golf background, it's like playing his courses is an evaluation of like your game. It's like, hey, do you have the shots? And you may not, but hey, there is a safe way to play. So if you're not very good, like, you can do this. But if you are looking for it, it's like, hey, if you want to play my game, here's my game. Like, but we're going to evaluate your game versus a lot of Corin Crenshaw, for instance. It's like, oh no, man, you can play it up this way and maybe get creative and go that way. And I just don't really, and some of that might be the type of land he puts his courses on, but it doesn't feel like I have 15 different ways I can play this shot. Most of the time it's like, no, I got 1 or 2. And like you said, D, just like, yeah, the 1 is what he's asking for.
Yeah. Which
to score, if you want to score, you got to do this.
Exactly. Which I think you see that we're kind of jumping all over the place, but you see that with tour players and kind of their growing fondness for the golf courses. I know, Charlie, you talked to Mav McNeely. Actually, I think we have that audio. Let me just play this.
What do you think about Pete Dye golf courses?
I think every time I play a Pete Dye golf course, I think I like it more. I think it's one of those unique tests where it doesn't favor any particular type of game. And it's definitely not one that you stand up on the tee and try and swing as hard as you can. The shot value is really important. You got to hit every club in your bag, every shape imaginable. And I think that's what people love to see and love to see professionals do with their golf ball. And there's a lot of the game that has to be shaped in the air. And I think Pete's a master at that.
Did you like it at first, or did it take some time to like Pete Dye?
The first time I played TPC Sawgrass, I didn't really understand the hype. And now I think this is my 5th or something players, and it's probably top 3 courses on tour for me. So it grew on me every single time I play it. I notice different features, and I think every hole is just awesome.
Oh, shoot back doing a little ham and egg with me in the press conference.
Yeah, there you go.
What a good quote that is.
Yeah, I think that kind of bottom lines it a little bit. But
Yeah.
guys, one more break in the action to say that I think this Pete Dye deep dive is the perfect setup to talk about Arccos, because nobody understood strategic golf better than our guy, as you've been hearing in this episode. Honestly, there may not be a better example than the Island Green at TPC Sawgrass. On paper, just a short par 3. We're going to hear about it in episode 2. Anybody who's stood on that tee, anybody who's watched the players, knows the stress starts ramping up as soon as players take the tee. The number almost never plays what the yardage is. That's exactly why the Arccos Smart Laser is so different. Arccos analyzed nearly 3.5 million smart laser readings from real golfers, found out that slope only accounts for only about 20% of what actually changes a shot's true playing distance. The rest of that is made up by wind, gusts, all kinds of different things. And, Pete Dye exposes this better than anybody. We know that. At 17 at Sawgrass, for instance, Arccos showed data that the same hole played anywhere from 126 yards to 149 yards on the same day, just depending on the wind, depending on the conditions. It's the same tee, it's the same green, it's the same island, totally different shot based on the moment. That's where the Smart Laser rangefinder comes in. Gives you a lot of calculations, gives you all kinds of things: humidity, temperature, altitude, gusts, slope, basically all the things that you need to know to confidently hit a good shot. And it helps you play faster, right? You don't want to be sitting there talking and thinking about all that stuff. So if you're listening to a podcast like this, you already know smart decisions matter in golf. That's the entire Arccos ecosystem: better data, better strategy, more confidence. Now's actually the perfect time to jump in. Arccos has their Father's Day promo going on. So if you've been thinking about getting the Smart Laser, maybe the new Arccos Air, don't have time to talk about how good that thing is today, go check it out. The inventory on the Air is tight, so go get it now. So it's in time for Father's Day. Go to arccosgolf.com, ARCCOS golf.com for great Father's Day savings across the Arccos lineup. Let's get back into our conversation about Pete Dye. Back to Crooked Stick a little bit. I think the other thing that I think this is a big example of, Charlie wanted to call this section Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Die, which we are absolutely not doing. But
don't put in the newspaper that we're calling it that.
But I think that he continued, and part of this is him living there and having a house there. Same with Teeth of the Dog, which we'll talk about. But he continued, like he was big on this idea that golf courses are not finished, which I really respect, and I think is a fascinating conversation in this day and age.
Tom Doak said that Pete would change the golf course not necessarily every year, but pretty regularly for 30 or 40 years. They just kept coming back. Apparently the membership got tired at one point, and of just hearing the sound of the dozer beep, 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 backing up. Yeah. Like, God, what are we tearing up this time?
But I just think it's a fascinating push and pull. We kind of fetishize a little bit these, like, oh, Donald Ross's dad wanted it this way, and so we can't have a grain of sand out of place. And Pete talks about this a lot, right? He talked about this. I think we have that clip too. He talked about it with Eric, that it's like, man, everything else in the world is evolving. Like, it's okay for the canvas to evolve as well.
There's a lot of people that say that, oh, we have an old Donald Ross course, we want to restore it just the way Donald did it in 1923. Well, let's see, that's 23, is 77, and 12 would be 85 years ago, right? Whew, a long time ago. Well, Donald Ross, I met him when I was in the service, World War II. I was at Fort Bragg, and that's very close to Pinehurst, and I used to go over and play Pinehurst after the war, and I was there for 6 months, and I went over there and I played, and I got to know Mr. Ross. But I got to know some of the people that worked on a golf course. Well, then the golf course, the grass, Bermuda grass at Pinehurst, and if you had a step meter reading, it'd be maybe 5 or 6. It was very slow compared to today. So Mr. Ross designed and built everything according to 1923. He didn't build it according to the year 2012. So knowing that he was a pretty good golfer in the way he set his golf courses up, he would never have the greens as contoured like he did back in 23 as today. Because if he did, you couldn't play him.
You know, he had to go back to crooked stick and redo the greens because they were too, you know, think about building this starting it in 1963, 64, whatever, all the way even just to the 1991 PGA Championship is like, think about how much green speeds and agronomy and technology changed in that period. And then you have the BMW Championship in whatever it was, 2014 or something, the one that Rory won. And it's like, you know, there's another almost 30 years or that goes by. And it's like, this is not everything else is standing still. And so I appreciate the other side of the coin that like the golf course doesn't need to necessarily stand still either, while still kind of respecting the general principles and the guiding, you know, the guiding light.
This was a topic that apparently would get Pete riled up. I would have liked to see him slinging takes with Brandel on Live From about some of these things. But if you started talking about the greens at Pinehurst, he gets into it with Eric. He said that it was not Ross's intention for the greens to be so pushed up. They got taller and taller over the years through top dressing, and that apparently Mr. Ross told him he wanted to cut the greens down and shave them off, but he didn't get to before he passed away. And then they've lingered that way. So yeah, he was not a big restoration guy. Pete was like, let's keep evolving.
Look at these turtlebacks, man. You wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah.
Ross is like, no, I don't like those.
That's impossible.
That's not my thing.
How the hell is anybody going to hit that? Yeah. We're kind of breezing through crooked stick, but there were a couple big tournaments, obviously before the PGA Championship. The 1983 Senior Amateur was played there, which Pete played in. Golf course got turned up way too high. This is when they decided they needed to redo the greens. Pete said even though it was his golf course, it made me want to withdraw and throw all the greens mowers into the lake. Just a hard one. Randy would have loved it. People are 4-putting, 5-putting. It was October in Indianapolis, so it's cold.
God, sounds like my qualifier jumping Brook Country.
It does.
We're getting de-greened out the ass. It's crazy.
But then, the 1991 PGA, famously won by John Daly, famously drafted in my award-winning PGA Championship draft. Probably don't need to do the whole John Daly sidebar, but I do think the story is interesting on how they actually got the tournament. This was a story I didn't know.
I did not know this either. There was a guy called Mickey Powell who caddied for Pete and Alice when Mickey was 13 at the Country Club of Indianapolis. Mickey, back in my day, both directions uphill in the snow, he would walk 6 or 7 miles to work along a railroad track, caddy with 2 bags, and then walk home, just really hoofing it, getting those steps in. Mickey's parents couldn't afford to send him to college, so Pete and Alice helped out. I don't know to what extent they helped out, if they floated the whole bill. You know, tuition might not have been as high in those days as it is now. Mickey went to Indiana Central University, which is now University of Indianapolis, was an all-conference golfer for 4 years, total player, became a club pro, became the owner of the Golf Club of Indiana, the founding owner, I believe, and which Neil, you and Randy would enjoy this, that Golf Club of Indiana fulfilled his dream of creating a public course that had the challenge of a championship layout. He would go on to become the president of the PGA of America, long way from 13-year-old caddying for our friends Pete and Alice. So after all this success, Mickey showed up on their doorstep and asked if he could pay them back for college. And Pete said, no, don't worry about it. Pay it forward. And Mickey said, no, Pete, you take the money. You help somebody out. So Pete said the only, among the young people that they helped out go to college, which was apparently more than just Mickey, he was the only one to pay them back. And Mickey, through his positions of power, went ahead and, as you may have guessed, successfully lobbied for Crooked Stick to become the host of the 1991 PGA. I don't know if he should have maybe recused himself in this situation or what, but he got it there.
I love it.
Well, that's interesting because it's built in 64, you said. Let's say 65, 66. It's open. So it takes another 30, almost 30 years for it to kind of reach acclaim. By that point, I guess you guys are going to get here, but like, when was it deemed like, when did they start getting attention of like, yo, they're doing these guys are doing some Nirvana stuff. They're creating a new genre.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to come at Harbortown.
Okay.
But we're going to get, that before that one, we've got another one that we're going to talk about, which is the Golf Club, number 2 on our list. You mentioned this earlier. This is in New Albany, Ohio, started in 1966. I think the most the most elusive, the most mysterious of his courses, probably. Charlie, would you agree with that?
I'm thinking of it as the most elusive on our list, maybe the second most elusive all time to what I believe is called White Oak outside
Oh,
of
sure. Yeah.
Jacksonville that
Yeah.
nobody has ever played
The
or will
last
ever
one.
play.
Yeah.
The last
Yeah.
one, which
That
Alan
you can
McKir-
see from the plane.
right, which has been talked about on the No Laying It Up podcast from time to time. That one was finished by Alan McKirk. That was very late in Pete's life. But this course, Neil, the golf club, of all the courses on our list, this is not one that you're going to play. And you being,
But I will say
anyone.
this:
Or
I
have
have
you played
friends
it?
that have played it. No, I have not played
Okay.
it, but I hear that people rave about the experience. A very good club culture. They have some real fun traditions, and it's like I don't know anything about it. I will give you a funny story though, kind of unrelated. But I was playing in a member guest years ago. This is 2017 maybe. And I'm not gonna say where because I don't want to out this person, but I'm playing against this other member guest crew. It's a match, it's a semifinal match, and I would this guy was pretty like ready to go to battle, and I was like, oh, where are you from? And he was like, oh, I play out of the country club, and I was like, oh, up in Columbus, hell yeah, man. And he was so offended, and it's like me, I'm like, oh, you mean like Brookline up in Boston, he didn't like. But I get the country club and the golf club mixed up, and I've always gotten a kick out of that. So anytime I hear the golf club, I'm like, okay, not the country club, the separate places.
I promise
that was a good one.
I promise that is never going to happen again after you understand why the golf club was founded, which we're going to talk about here shortly. Song comp, I don't have a great one here either. Well, actually, you know what? I do have a great one.
This
is a good one. This is Charlie's direction. Mysterious early work that's more minimalist than the rest of the catalog. Almost no one has ever heard it. I don't know if almost no one has ever heard it. I don't know. But I said there's a song called Fred Jones Part 2 by Ben Folds. First of all, the owner of the property is named Fred Jones. So that's where my head went there. I think the song's about a guy getting laid off by the newspaper, but it's it's stripped down. It's Ben Folds in the piano. It's not Brick. It's not One Angry Dwarf. It's not Rockin' the Suburbs. It's a B-side. But I think it's minimalist and it's fucking called Fred Jones. And the guy we're about to talk about Fred Jones. So it's the best I can do. Charlie, I don't know if you had another one for this one or not.
I had a very esoteric one. I think an early Sonlux record that you just gave me the buzzer. Like don't know it. See ya.
I don't know, maybe something like with Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton before like Led Zeppelin. They
Yardbirds
all those guys
sort of situation.
Playing together before Cream and Led Zeppelin came around. It's like maybe something like that.
It's a good one, especially with the collaboration angle, which we're gonna talk about in a second. I had no shame about picking well-known stuff for my songs because Pete Dye's he's well known. He's a mainstream guy. But anywho, all right, let me lay the history on you here, Neil. So this is from the golf club's historical book. Guy William L. Case is quoted as saying, Fred Jones was a member at the Columbus Country Club and became very disenchanted with all of the activities at the modern country club. He would, quote, bitch about the automobile dealers having a party at the club. He couldn't get on the golf course, or it was ladies' day, or it was juniors' day, and so on and so on.
The hell is this?
And the last straw was when it was suggested at one point by another member that Columbus should host a PGA championship. They should put their hat in the ring to host a PGA championship. Our guy Fred Jones expressed violent objection to this idea. And during a dinner party, one of the younger members of the club fired back with, well, Mr. Jones, if you think that way, then why don't you go out and build your own golf course? That's what he did. So the golf club's historical book says a major attribute of the club is, quote, freedom from encroachment. Stay the hell away. And it just goes on to say the golf club was not founded as a family recreation or amusement center. It was not and is not now intended to serve all of the recreational needs of all members of a family. It is decidedly, Neil, not the country club.
You want to go to the pool? Then build one in your fucking backyard, okay? Take that shit out of here.
It is not the country club. It is the golf club, which, listen, I hope it doesn't sound like we're throwing shade here. This is I'm a purist.
Purpose-built stuff is good. I have no problem as long as you are being transparent about it. That's like, no, this is purpose-built. This is very specific. Talk about design build.
Exactly.
Even from the idea standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking 150 members, Neil. boys only, full boys club. According to ProPublica on the internet, don't know if this is all accurate. It's about a $750K initiation.
Okay.
Yeah, which the men only situation is interesting. That's going to come up later, and I think is compelling from the Alice of it all.
Sure.
Aspect. I think early in the career, maybe Pete was able to get away with something like this. I do not think he was going to get away with this much beyond the golf.
And I would say, I'm guessing, let me try to front run you here, outflank you. Crooked Stick picks up a little bit of buzz. Some guy comes back to Ohio. It's like, hey, there's like this guy, upstart, Fred's like, who do I go to? It's like, well, check out this guy. They're doing some grungy stuff over in
Carmel. You're pretty spot on, Pete. I mean, the other thing he had going for him is he was from nearby, right? He's from Urbana, only an hour away from New Albany in Ohio. Pete's parents were friends with our guy Fred Jones. I just have the song in my head now. Randy's the only other person I know that likes that song, which makes sense because it's like the saddest song ever. At the time, Pete's credentials they're pretty modest. He'd built the second course at University of Michigan by this point, the Radrick Farms course, which I've never played but desperately want to. Was in the middle of building Crooked Stick, like you said. The other people he had on his side, you might remember, he was reaching out to the USGA folks about hey, can you get us some work? We're these two upstart husband and wife. We're trying to get some deals going. And the executive secretary at the time, Joe Dye, DEY, no relation, and Ward Fauché, former president of the USGA, they were in Pete's corner, recommended him for the job to our guy Fred Jones. So Pete said that Fred told me unequivocally that I was in charge and that he wouldn't bother me and that I would only answer to him. And Mr. Jones, very much true to his word. Charlie, paint the picture. Like, what's interesting about this one from a golf course perspective? Because it's very different than let's push up dirt, let's throw a bunch of railroad ties, let's really bend the earth to our will type of spot.
Before I answer that question, can I just jump on to emphasize what you just said about Fred Jones essentially telling him, go do it, you're in charge? Like, contextually, early in Pete and Alice's careers, they got I don't know about a blank check, but they got this guy who Alice described as a lovable dictator. He was an autocratic owner, but he was well resourced, this insurance magnate. And he said, you guys go do it, go build something that looks like it's been here forever as soon as it's finished.
That was for Crooked Stick.
No, that was for the golf club.
For the golf club. Okay, so Mr. Jones is the insurance magnate.
Yes. And so they get carte blanche to go make something cool. There's not going to be any housing on property, free from encroachment. Pete made a mistake of asking Fred Jones where the housing is going to go, and Fred almost fired him on the spot for asking the question. I think Pete said, as soon as I asked the question, I saw his look and I knew I'd made a mistake. Almost lost the job, but was left to go run with it. I am not a golf course designer, have never been one, but it doesn't seem like it's an easy world in which to get jobs. And when you do get jobs, I think it's probably pretty common that golf courses have housing nearby, or the course is built as an amenity.
Well, especially in this time frame. I mean, this was like I'm just thinking about growing up in Atlanta, and every course is just an excuse. They're just subdivisions. Like, how that's the only way you're making money on the golf course.
So I think it was just huge that they said, all right, let's go make something great and turn it into a calling card, which is what they did.
And Pete kind of goes all in on this. He sees Fred Jones's bona fides, never doubts for a second that Fred is down for this. He's good to finance the club. He's good for the money, which is put to the test early because Fred Jones ends up getting hospitalized early on in construction. So he's kind of incapacitated, and Pete ends up borrowing $40,000 just against his own name to keep the construction going himself. Just never a thought to, if it doesn't work out, then I'm on the hook for this money. He just goes and does it. And Jones was apparently astounded when he ended up, coming back to and learned about this. And he asked Pete what he would have done, if he had died. And Pete had a good quote. He said, well, I've told him that I would have bought a lily and climbed right in that pine box with him. which which is
What if they shot you in the face?
a little bit, yeah. But I think it just kind of like underscores what Charlie was saying. Like it's a pretty dream job, man. Like
Yeah.
out in the woods doing whatever you want to do on land that is pretty great for golf. You're not trying to, you're just trying to make an art project out there. And he had a great owner, and he was the guy. I think he said Mr. Jones doled out the money and I spent it, no questions. That's a pretty dream scenario. So as far as the property is pretty rolling terrain. I've never been out there, but big oak trees, beautiful country, farmland, Blacklick Creek meandering through the property. We don't know how many times they crossed it in the first 9, but recurring theme. We talked about this, but he goes big on this idea of the appearance of elevating greens without actually elevating them. Which I think makes sense, particularly like amongst the trees, right? I think this kind of speaks to probably what Doak was telling you too, Neil. But Charlie, I know he had like some quotes about this.
Yeah, Doak said that this is effectively a minimalist golf course, aside from a few features, and I think that has changed a little bit over time as it got renovated. But on the whole, 10,000-foot view, this is one of Pete's most minimalist style courses. It's a lot of lay of the land. Let's find the green sites naturally in these woods. Let's, not move thousands and thousands of tons of dirt if we don't have to, those kinds of things.
And I think,
Guys, can I be honest? Like, this is one of those courses. I'll be totally honest. I don't know what it looks like. I know the logo
totally
is
aligned,
like a elk.
It's a buck.
Yeah.
Or a buck. Thank you. But I could not tell you like what the calling card is here.
Same page. I've only
It's probably
seen
intentional by the golf
I
club.
think that's exactly right. Which honestly, I think speaks to some of the influences that Pete talks about as well. He just like he was listing his kind of British Isles influences, he was listing his American influences as well. And one of them was Camargo, which is another very exclusive place in
Camargo rules.
Ohio that he had played a bunch of times in USGA qualifiers and US amateurs and things like that. And he talks about how the membership at Camargo is so limited, right? That like very few people have actually seen it, which is the same situation at the golf club, right? And I mean, Charlie, I know we were talking about this too, but it ends up kind of changing a little bit. Like I think that has a little bit of an impact on him going forward. I mean, especially if you think about some of the later stuff on our list, it's less and less like don't fucking tell anybody that this golf course exists type of places, and it's more like, hey, the art's meant to be seen sort of stuff.
Yeah, he weighed in on a course later on that we'll get to, asking the developers specifically, like saying, I don't want this to be too restrictive. I want people to see this. It was on his mind for sure.
On the Camargo front, there's a couple things on this like references section that I love, but he loved Camargo. He even got asked, this was like, I forget the year, this was way back or kind of like later in his career, he got asked to come in and spruce it up and renovate it and do all these great things to Camargo. And so he goes to Cincinnati and he spends a bunch of hours walking the course looking at it, and he describes this in his book. He says, quote, I was finally escorted into Camargo's boardroom, where a group of distinguished business executives requested my views regarding what was wrong with their course. Sitting in khakis among these elite gentlemen, I extolled the virtues of Seth Raynor's design, but the committee kept insisting I tell them what problems I saw. Finally, I bluntly told them that as far as I could tell, the only thing wrong with Camargo was its membership, and that they would be wise to leave Mr. Raynor's course alone. Which is a massive hell yeah, right? But it's also like, I think it's very interesting on that push and pull between, our golf course is finished, are they not finished? What's if you got a good, beautiful hardwood floor, you got to leave that thing alone. But
don't mess with this.
If not, then it's okay to change it up and blow it up. So I like that anecdote.
I mean, and I would like echo, like Camargo's got some outrageous stuff, but it just, this, I would say the same thing. Like, they don't build them like these anymore. So don't mess with this.
Yeah. The other,
especially the par threes out there, incredible.
The other one he shouted out as a, wildly different place, because it's obviously in South Florida on the ocean, but he shouted out as another inspiration was Seminole, Donald Ross golf course, and there were a couple of interesting things he liked about Seminole.
Yeah, he cites the thing that we talked about earlier, this idea of alternating directional sequences, a hole that confronts golfers with a drive that should be played left to right off the tee, and then right to left toward the green. The opposite true on the next hole. alternating intermittently throughout 18. The quote from Barry Me is, while Donald Ross contributed many design innovations to the profession, this one took me a while to discover, but then influenced me the most.
This couldn't be more off topic, but as he's writing about Seminole, I had to include this story. He got to play Seminole with Ben Hogan one time, and Ben Hogan is like his guy. He speaks very reverentially about the grit and the determination and digging it out of the dirt and the whole thing with Ben Hogan. And he writes about it. He says, in the mid-70s, I was asked to play Seminole with Ben Hogan, and I was more nervous than I've ever been before a round of golf. I was sitting in Seminole's locker room with my 3 guests when the club pro interrupted, asking whether I'd want to play with Mr. Hogan. Very quickly, I made arrangements for my guests to play with someone else. The Ben Hogan Company had just come out with a new set of clubs that year, and I remember being afraid that Mr. Hogan might be offended when he saw that I was playing a set of Tommy Armour irons. So quickly I ran to the pro shop and purchased a new set of Hogan medallions. Then I thought Mr. Hogan might wonder why they had no scuff marks on them, so I sneaked back behind the pro shop and pounded the irons on a cement walk until they looked used. I think it's just everybody living in fear of Ben Hogan is, I think, what a golf's great, great
Also, so Dye was a member at Seminole.
Yeah. I think he
learned that too.
I think he likes sunshine, and I think he got around to places where it was sunny.
Seems like it.
Yeah. So the other big notable thing about the golf club is that, again, kind of an inflection point on where we're headed in the future. The guy there's a person who keeps hanging around the construction site. Neil, do you know who this might be? This is what, 1966?
Something like that. Somebody loitering on site.
Bill Core.
No, good guess though. Bill Core is going to come up later. 27-year-old Jack Nicklaus.
Okay.
Very interested in golf course design. Ohio guy. He just, he keeps.
I mean, already like the dude.
Yes, already the dude, but kind of peak. Kind of on his way to becoming the peak dude, right? And so, there's some good backstory between him and Jack, like before this as well.
Yeah, they'd played against each other in the Trans-Mississippi Amateur at Prairie Dunes in Hutchinson, Kansas in, was it 1957? They played in the U.S. Open together at Inverness in 1957, but a year later, they met in the semifinals of the Trans-Miss Amateur. 18-year-old Jack was just out driving Pete. The hooks couldn't hang with the young buck. Jack was blown at 30 yards by him, and he won 3-2. Jack won a day later, his first amateur victory of any national repute, apparently. And Pete was fond of saying that if I had beaten him, it would have changed the history of golf. Just a very Pete quote.
Butterfly effect.
Sliding doors. That's right.
For sure. But maybe my favorite Jack anecdote, he was walking the property and he was weighing in on some design ideas. They were talking back and forth because they had built up a bit of rapport. So Pete, for example, asked Jack what he thought of the 188-yard par 3 third hole, which played across a pond to a circular green surrounded by some symmetrically arrayed rocks and wood planking. You'll be shocked to learn. Jack, in a very Goodwill Hunting moment, said, "Pete, that's the ugliest hole I've ever seen in my life." It's like, that's the ugliest fucking car I've ever seen in my life. So Pete changed the hole, and he built a gigantic 3-level bunker on the left-hand side and used a bunch of railroad ties for bulkheading after Jack's suggestion.
Huh. I'm surprised that Pete wasn't, why Jack went with Desmond Muirhead for Muirfield Village.
Pete joked that the reason they didn't get into business together, we'll go into this a little more in our next chapter too, is that Jack wanted to make money building golf courses and Pete didn't.
That's good stuff.
So the course ended up taking about 2 years to actually complete. Blacklick Creek came into play on 4 holes. Not a great deal of earth movement. Again, it's supposed to be a very naturalistic sort of golf course. Pete said it was much more of an old English kind of heathland, Sunningdale, Wentworth sort of golf course. Anything else?
Which surprises me when you've got a blank check.
Totally.
For him to show that kind of restraint in an early project with an owner that's like, do whatever you want, and he goes minimalist. That's interesting to me.
There was a good moment on the 12th hole, Neil, to that effect, where he writes, he says, I think the 12th hole is my favorite hole. That's the one I remember most, partly because it's also the hole where I needed help. I needed more land, and I was scared to death to go to Mr. Jones, but I finally did. I told him it'd be nice if we could buy 5 or 6 acres behind the existing 12th tee. And just to reiterate, Jones had already bought like 400 acres. This was supposed to be a golf course in the middle of this big, kind of undisturbed boundary, and of course Pete's like, oh no, well, this is not enough, we need to use more. But this is the first time he does it. This would not be the last time he does it. In fact, he becomes quite good at just oh, what's the line? Yeah, that doesn't matter, we're gonna keep going over here. But when he, to his credit, Jones asked him what's it for, and Pete told him he wanted to, if you want to make the hole look like it's always been here, we're going to need this land to build a chute for this tee back onto that land. And he went out and bought it, no more questions. So to your point about the experienced, notorious club for its very strict protocol, when Senator Robert Taft visited there, he was wearing a sports shirt, and jackets, of course, were required in the club. Mr. Jones apparently flipped, scolded him. He said, "Where do you think you are, the Senate dining room?" Pretty good burn there. This is the site of what Charlie alluded to earlier. Alice not immediately impressed when she saw the first hole.
So Mr. Jones invited Alice out to offer her opinion of the course, and she told Fred that she believed that Pete had done a better job than she ever would have thought possible, which is a nice backhanded compliment to start things off.
Sure.
But to use her exact words, the first hole was undoubtedly the worst starting hole in golf. And Pete says, much to my chagrin, Alice was right. She describes her reasoning in the golf club's historical book that I got a copy of, which is, by the way, just like a sick black leather bound book with the buck on the inside cover. It's a pretty cool book. The quote from that is, Fred didn't want to take out all those wonderful old beech trees from the right side of the fairway, but you had no shot with them there. The hole has an elevated tee, and Blacklick Creek cuts diagonally across it. That's one crossing, DJ. Before the dogleg right up to the green. There are huge traps on the right side after the dogleg, but because of the trees, you couldn't even see them if you wanted to cut the creek. You couldn't see the traps because of the trees. They're kind of obscured, apparently. So there was, according to Alice, no way to play the hole fairly. So they cut down the trees and fixed the hole.
There you have it.
How about that? I have heard, and I don't know, I don't know much about the golf club, but I feel like someone told me that there's like a required breakfast ball.
Oh, I don't know.
Off the first tee. It's like a club policy, like, you have to hit a breakfast ball. So
you gotta,
somebody tell me if I'm wrong on that.
You gotta ask Solly. I think Solly's played out there.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Don't invite the C-suite to these recordings.
There's famously a hangman's noose out on the 16th hole, because I think Fred Jones had kind of a sick sense of humor. Out there is long par 3, failed to reach the green like many times in a row on this par 3, and so he put this noose out on the branch of this like 270-year-old white oak tree. Just kind of you can read into that, if the hole goes the way it did for me, here's your option.
I think it's no longer there, but it was up for a while. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah.
The noose got canceled.
Yeah, noose is kind of that's a tough visual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Pete, by and large, just spoke extremely glowingly about the place. He talks about how magical it was that, the holes are far apart, at least like feel far apart. He talks about feeling like he's out there. He's the only person on the face of the earth out at dusk. Like it's one of those types of places. He said, I doubt I ever had more fun building a golf course than I did at the golf club. Fred was
to be fair, he says about a few courses. But
yeah. Don't let them.
And that's a life well lived.
That's right.
I mean, that's something for all of us to strive for. Of like, the next project is the best project.
I literally can't remember which one was the most fun. They were all they were all fun.
Oh, it was sick. Yeah. It was just really a sick run.
I love the way he categorizes Fred. Said Fred was a tough old bird, but he treated me with great respect. He brought me honor by selecting me to design his dream course. There you have it.
Yeah, Alice didn't like him, but he's cool with me.
A couple cool.
I will say, ahead of his time, and you could take this for like good or bad, but I mean, what's getting built now, guys? It's either resorts, from kind of consolidating mega golf resort companies, or it's rich guy playgrounds.
Rich guy dream course, totally.
And I would say during this time period, it was not that. It was subdivisions, it was development courses, basically all the stuff that we grew up on.
Yeah.
So Mr. Jones was God, 50 years ahead of his time. It sounds like,
Yeah.
because I can't. This is wrong because this is just showing that I don't know what I'm talking about. But like, would love some other examples in the 60s or 70s of this type of build. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it seems like they were either like 1914 or 2019.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did get one more interesting story about Mr. Jones and the early membership that, despite the exclusivity of it, apparently he had his guys, his friends who he wanted to join. And in one case, there was a member who Fred called up and said, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm starting this project. Do you want to join?" And the man, I think, who had a younger family at the time said, "You know what, Fred, it's just not a great time for me. Don't know if I have the bread at this moment." Fred said, "Okay, no problem." And this guy was also in insurance. And after that phone call, the guy's business started to take off. Bunch of calls came in, bunch of new business. Fred called him back a little while later, said, "How about now? Doing any better?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, actually I am. Let's do it."
What you know, Deej.
Yeah, sometimes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones. I really need that pool.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to. Can we get some tennis courts? You know,
This is kind of on the club side of it. I did like this note. There's exactly 150 lockers and exactly 150 members. So the idea is when, members accepted into the club, they're assigned the locker like most in the rear of the locker room. And then as lockers as members sort of phase out and you increase in seniority, you get moved closer and closer to the front of the room. And when the member passes away, they take their member badge and they put it up above the fireplace on the mantle. And so the members like to say, basically, you start out at the rear, you move towards the front, but your final move is always to the fireplace, which is kind of a nice
a one in, one out policy.
Yeah. And
150 is there's like research on this, like when organizations get over 100, probably 200, it's like you don't know everybody.
Right.
You can't, humans, like, I guess biologically, like, can't keep, it's too big of a tribe at that point.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think most notably, there's never been an outside event held at the golf course. That was kind of the goal, and it seems like they've
don't do that.
Stuck to that. Mr. Jones's intention for the club was for it to be used by the members. Apparently, at one point, I don't know if this was verified. There was the USGA was considering moving their headquarters to the golf club, which is fascinating. And then conversation came to an immediate halt when they're like, "Yeah, obviously we could have the U.S. Open there." They're like, "Nope, no chance." Yeah. So that's the golf club. All right, guys, that brings us to course number 3 on our list, which I think is going to be the last course we'll cover in this episode. We'll pick it back up in episode 2. That is, of course, going to be Harbour Town, the vaunted Harbour Town golf links. I think, Neil, let's kick it off with a little video asset, should we?
Sailing out of Gravesend, England on the trade route, Captain William Hilton, one August morning in 1663, came upon an island peaceful and serene. A lush green headland off the southeastern corner of what is today the state of South Carolina. And he wrote in his ship's log, "Facing on the sea, the air is clean and sweet. It is the most pines, tall and good. The land the goodliest, best, and fruitfulest isle that ever was seen." Today it is called Hilton Head Island, with its ancient trees and shells and shoreline, and this quiet resting place for the old families that worked the land, marked now only by the hand-cut gravestones hidden under the great moss.
I think that's probably good. I think the goodliest, best, and truthfulest isle that was ever seen is a pretty good way to sum up the vibe on Hilton Head.
The guy from Springfield, Ohio, being best known for a course on Hilton Head, that's on the nose. Okay, as someone who spent a lot of time in Hilton Head as a kid, and whose parents are from Ohio, they knocked it out of the park with that one.
Is that a pipeline that I'm not aware of?
Oh yeah, Midwest loves
Ohio
going
specifically.
to Hilton Head. Ohio, it's just like Ohio license plate on the way in and out of Hilton Head.
Yeah, there's it.
Let's sell some condos, dude.
Well, I think that's what this little quote unquote documentary advertisement is all about. It's just extolling the virtues the great Hilton Head Island, site of Harbortown golf links. This was, I think, made right after the first playing of the Heritage, which we're gonna talk about. But according to that documentary, our guy Captain William Hilton was the first colonizer who sailed into Hilton Head, paving the way for many generations of future big and little Randys to go on vacation with their families. Pete described the developer of Sea Pines, a guy named Charles Frazier, as a man who had, quote, the most imagination of any developer I have ever known. Pete cites evidence as the fact that Frazier took a small, desolate island without even a bridge and convinced his skeptics that he could build a resort that could captivate the world. Maybe a little bit of hyperbole going on there with that closing sentiment, but the point's well taken, and it seemed like it went pretty well for Charles Frazier. Charlie, I'll throw it over to you for this section, but the deeper you go, maybe in some of the South Carolina history, you end up bumping on some pretty not heartwarming stuff pretty quickly, but I think it is fairly related to the conversation here.
You're giving me the laughs part. Thanks, DJ. Yeah, I mean, where there is a successful developer on Hilton Head, for example, there is a whole story of black land, historically black land, that had been passed down through an informal heirs system that existed because in Jim Crow South, black folks didn't have access. They were barred from using legal services. So there was this informal system, and a lot of developers, I don't know if Frazier and Sea Pines specifically, I'm not going to make a claim to that, but a lot of developers on Hilton Head used these tactics to acquire that land. They would convince certain heirs who owned partitions of land to sell their share to them, and then they would force a share of the whole partition. I think they could do that by suing to clear the title, forcing an auction, and then essentially easily outbidding the rest of those heirs. So what this let them do was acquire prime real estate for pennies on the dollar. Was it legal? Yes. Was it ethical? I'm going to go with a no on that one. So this is not the only golf course where sitting on land where things like this have happened, obviously. But as we're digging into what's the background of this course, who's the developer here, who's the owner here, I start to do a little searching and found pretty quickly oh God, it's a messy one.
Yeah.
Let's get Randy on the horn.
Yeah, exactly. All these people buying fucking.
Come on, Charlie. I just want to
chairs.
go ride my bike on vacation. Stick to golf, would you?
Well, say what you will about the history, but our guy Charles Frazier he knew the golf boom was coming here in the mid 60s. And so he wanted to build a championship golf course in the lowland by the ocean, something that had an old fashioned look and feel. First call he made was to Jack Nicklaus for the job. Jack, of course, at this time, very busy tour player, doesn't really have a ton of time to be running around designing golf courses full time. But like we said about, the golf club, he's very interested in the project, interested in becoming a designer. And earlier we established that him and Pete have a great relationship. And so, dating back to obviously stuff in Ohio, the golf club, competitive golf. And so Jack suggested, why don't we bring Pete into the project? They agreed to collaborate. Seems like kind of a dream combo, right? When you break it down, you've got Jack's name associated with the project. You've got Jack's vision for the project, his kind of nips and tucks and ideas.
Sorry, what year is this?
This is 69.
Okay. So we're still in the 60s. Got
69. So you've got Jack's name and everything good that comes with Jack, but you've also got Pete Dye, the guy who knows how to design and build a golf course and actually get it done. So it's kind of a Tom Doak, Brooks Koepka Memorial Park sort of situation. But yeah, an interesting one. Worth noting, I think, I didn't know this, but before Pete and Jack came along, the famous architect George Cobb actually designed the first 7 courses on Hilton Head Island, and was commissioned by Frazier to, naturally as the guy to do the next one. So he sketched some preliminary routings and had a plan for what to do on Harbortown, and Pete credits Cobb for his innovative work on that front. Don't know exactly what happened or how they moved on to Pete and Jack, but there's definitely a little bit of George Cobb in that routing that carried over that's worth mentioning. But on the actual land front, it's worth mentioning again that this is kind of the first instance of Pete designing courses in the Low Country. If you know anything about Pete Dye, you know this is definitely not the last. We're going to get a lot more of these, but same thing. Crew started by dredging out canals. We got to get this water out of here. We got to start making some land for golf. We got to build lagoons to handle all this excess runoff. And you know, when you end up draining all the water off, like you're kind of hoping that like what's under there is interesting stuff, right? Not exactly what they found at Harbortown.
The word that Pete used was unimpressive. Once they exposed the land, the property was unimpressive. The change in elevation between the highest and lowest points on the property was 4 feet. So yeah, Pete ended up getting maybe even pigeonholed in a way to over time become this let's make something out of nothing guy. And you know, he contained multitudes, as we were kind of talking about before, contradictions with the aw shuck self-deprecation and his confidence. Well, he also contained multitudes in terms of he's infamous for his ability to receive an unlimited budget and manage to exceed it, which will come up a couple of times throughout this. This wasn't necessarily one of those projects, but he had this utilitarianism, DJ, you were talking about earlier as well. So at Harbortown, for example, he was proud of the fact that he spread sand and covered it with pine needles around many areas of the rough, which provided the course with the Pinehurst look that he was fond of, and also decreased the amount of maintenance that was required and decreased the cost there. That's kind of a small example, but the book is full of those things like, look what I did there. I managed to save a bunch of money on drainage by doing this, or save a bunch of money on mowers by spreading pine needles over sandy areas and making them look native.
Yeah, and he got like you said, he was pretty proud of this idea, I think, because he loved running in the opposite direction of these like very, very manicured golf courses. Here's a little bit of him talking to Eric Lang about it.
We keep the golf courses so manicured nowadays as the cost is going up. And I don't really like that too much, but I don't run the world. But like you go to a lot of the courses in Ireland, England, Scotland, their maintenance is nothing like what we do in our country, and we've escalated it. A lot of it has come from where the builders are building homes, and they built homes. So now the lady lives here, and on the other side of the fairway, another lady, and they want everything manicured from one side to the other.
Yeah, he wasn't about that. But one of the favorite quotes that was known to kind of make the rounds before Harbortown also comes from this book, which is, he said, quote, in an ironic way, my designs at Harbortown were influenced by the architecture of Robert Trent Jones, in that I took Mr. Jones's ideas and I headed in the opposite direction. This is pretty good stuff. And I think, Charlie, you can maybe sum this up too, but like at this time, like we said, Robert Trent Jones was out there, big greens, big tees, big budgets, big everything. And when you think about Harbortown, it's so the opposite, right? It's very intimate, it's small, it's tree lined, it's small greens. And, you know, I think Pete kind of took this idea of being a contrarian a little bit to heart and just ran with it and turned into something that was pretty great.
It was super motivating for him. Yeah, let's build the most finessey shot-making course possible when the guy on the scene at the moment is building these huge brawny courses. So one anecdote to this effect, well, two, that was not the only time that he said, you see whatever that guy's doing over there, like we'll be okay if we do the exact opposite. Someone who told me a different version of that story about a different course and a different designer. But anyway, when I was talking with George and Mac Fry at Kiowa, George Fry was the original super at Kiowa, and Mac is his son, who developed a friendship with Pete over the years. Mac told me that he was having lunch with Pete in Indiana one day, and the subject of another golf course, who Mac wouldn't tell me what the course was or who the designer was, but the subject of this course came up, and Pete just stormed out of the restaurant. No explanation. They were
Offended.
like, did we, what happened? Did we say something to offend him? Pete comes back with the plans for that other course and starts eviscerating it, just tearing it apart, talking about everything that they had done wrong with it.
It's great. He was a man of strong opinions for sure. And another one, like kind of involved in the strategy, like we talked about, you know, slowly learning this, and now it's been about a decade, right, since we've been we've been designing golf courses. I think at Harbor Town they also started to get much deeper into this idea of who's playing the golf course, right? Like who are we building this golf course for? This is going to be a resort course. This is not the golf club. So I think that was one of the things that Jack needed to come to terms with as well. Here's a little bit of Jack kind of speaking to that.
I say he cleared the golf course with silk gloves. Pete went down and individually marked every tree. He'd put a certain colored ribbon on the tree for the tree to be taken down, another colored ribbon for the fellow to start to be very careful because there's other trees right next to that he wants to save, and then trees he definitely wanted to save, he put another colored ribbon on. A great number of things happen underground on a golf course, which certainly the average golfer doesn't see, that really goes into the cost of a golf course. Basically, the cost of a watering system, the pipes and the heads are all fairly fixed cost, but it all depends on what you're putting it in. At Hilton Head, you're putting it in sand, and it's not too expensive to put piping in. But in the northern part of the United States, a lot of times you're dealing with rock and clay and other things that make it more difficult, and it does become more costly.
I think on that front, like he wasn't very precious about certain parts of getting the job done, right? I mean, the fifth hole, I think, was that the dump hole?
Yeah, I mean, it can get precious very quickly. Like, oh, here's this great man, this great genius, this designer. Look at all the strategy, look at all the visual deception. And then Pete in his book is like, yeah, fifth hole was an island dump. We must have buried 30 cars, 10 trucks there. It was an old asphalt pit. Everything that we didn't want, we just put in that hole. That's that mound. We're over on 5.
Kind of feels like the spot to talk about waste bunkers as well, where just for background, during construction at Harbor Town, Pete noticed that there was the local sewer patrol was out there according to him, fighting a losing battle with a broken pipe near Harbor Town's border. With raw sewage about to pour over the area, he suggested that the workers pump it into a large, narrow depression that was going to be used for a bunker. This, Neil, is the origin of the term waste bunker, which I did not know.
Okay, I'll think about that every time I'm in one. Like, this might be contaminated. Might need my hazmat suit.
Now I understand why people at other courses bristle at the use of that term, knowing the origins of it.
This is me projecting, but he strikes me as somebody that would that would hear about that or see that happening and go over and be like, let me go tell these city workers what I think they should do. I heard that problem. Like, here's some unsolicited advice. Why don't you pump it over here? Like, oh yeah, good idea.
As far as notable holes, I mean, the short par 4, the 13th hole at Harbor Town, one of the most talked about, highly regarded holes, probably in Pete's whole catalog. Charlie, I don't think it treated you very well when you were down there.
We're not going to talk about that.
Alice, when they were designing this one, she asked Pete what he planned to do with this green during construction. He told her he had absolutely no clue what he was going to do. So he asked her to take a crack at it with a couple of guys from the crew, which is another one of my favorite stories here.
There was a bulldozer operator named TP, capital T E E, capital P E E. I don't know what the story is there. I probably should ask Bobby Weeder or somebody about that. But Alice and TP went over to 13 and carved out this kind of small heart-shaped green protected by this wild horseshoe bulkheaded bunker using these old gray cypress planks. I find this green to be completely ridiculous, but am tainted by the 8 that I made on that hole after getting pot bunkered. But the story from the book that I love is that, like, right at the beginning of this inaugural Heritage Classic, or toward the beginning of that tournament, Pete was dressed like a day laborer. He was like, doing some work early in the morning on 13, and a couple of spectators came over and he heard them say, oh, this is such a beautiful golf hole that Jack Nicklaus built. And somebody told me that Pete might have had a couple drinks the night before, and he said, actually, I'll have you know, a fine young lady built this golf hole. And the gentleman turned around, walked away, and Pete overheard them say, well, that's a morning drunk for you.
I also love that they were just running so down to the wire on this hole. They were still spreading sand or pine needle. I think it was sand in the bunker on 13 as the first players for the tournament are like coming around the corner on Thursday morning.
So this was purpose built for PGA event.
I don't know about purpose built. It was like purpose built as a resort, but I think they had I don't know if it was a handshake or whatever to host the tournament right at.
Yeah, interesting how quickly they fired it up as a tournament venue,
especially compared to Crooked Stick, right? Like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was a deadline for sure. There's another story about a tree on the corner of a dog leg where Pete was standing and watching players during this tournament wrap their drives beautifully around this tree, and they all found the fairway. It was served as kind of a visual guide for them. I think it was on the first day, Thursday or Friday, and the players came back the next day and the tree was gone, and they all drove it. Pete watched again. They all drove it in the waste bunker because they no longer had this sort of visual helper to avoid it with some hidden trouble.
Yeah. But yeah, to your point, the first Heritage took place Thanksgiving of 1969. Great time to be in South Carolina, right? Thanksgiving in Hilton Head. It sounds great. Good photos from back then. Golfers in just sweaters and pleats. 40-year-old Arnie just looking incredibly dapper in a teal cardigan. And like you said, Pete's out there watching everything and making adjustments to the course kind of as it goes. And they ended up putting this video together, which is great. We'll throw a couple clips in there, but Jack looking suave, Pete looking a little awkward in the video. It's good stuff. But Jack had to like change gears, right? Because if you think about it, I mean, again, 1969, he's like kind of approaching the peak of his powers and also designing the golf course. It's just it's a weird one to be able to, to be the guy designing the golf course and also going out and trying to win the golf tournament, which he did not do because Arnold Palmer ended up winning the first one by 3 over Dick Crawford and Bert Yancey with a score of 1 under par. So a true test out there at Harbortown. Ended a 14-month winless streak, or winless drought, I should say, for Arnold Palmer, which was massive for the course, massive for Hilton Head. So, massive for kind of Arnie's popularity and extending that on the PGA Tour. It's just a bunch of things all going at the right people, right place, right time that I think kind of helps this just absolutely, take off. Kind of goes like about as good as you could imagine.
It seems to me now also massive credibility for Pete Dye.
Yes.
On who he's working with and who's vouching for him as a okay, he's designing a PGA Tour venue now and not it's not some eclectic guy in New Albany that wants a very isolated place.
I think that is the best way to tease towards the episode 2, because like this is the place that basically puts Pete Dye on Dean Beeman's radar when he wants to design TPC Sawgrass. That becomes a whole can of worms that we'll talk about in the next episode. And we're off to the races at that point. But before we get there, Charlie, anything other big picture stuff on Harbortown?
Just doubling down on the PTI. I've been texting Randy as we make this, I have been reporting on this episode, like Pete kept receipts about the extents of the proper tests at these tournaments. Like he's, bragging in the book about how Lee Trevino shot 11 over, but still managed to call Harbortown the greatest course I've ever played.
That's a feat.
It is a feat.
There's more evidence too to how he looks at designing as an evaluation of someone's game and not whether someone had fun or not. So I think there's some architects, I get the sense that they're like, no, my work is not, I'm not going to comment as much on my work. It's for you to decide. Some artists are that way. It feels like he's like, no, this is how you should play it. And there's a score to tell you if you did it well. And it's bonus if you still like the course and you got your ass kicked. I love that.
Yeah, I think it was 2-1 rounds in the 80s versus subpar scores at that inaugural Heritage Classic. So I made a note in here that we should do a genealogy check on Randy, given the Hilton Head associations and the PTI adoption.
Might be where it was from. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, notably, Harbortown reopens this past year with a restoration by Scott Sherman and Davis Love's organization, which is also we're going to hear them pop back up at TPC Sawgrass. But I think that's enough teasing to episode 2. I mean, we've got a lot more that we're going to cover. We got a shitload of firsthand audio that we're going to play in episode 2. Neil, we're going to talk about your Long Cove experience. I can't wait for that. Sure. All kinds of stuff that we're going to get to. But Charlie, great stuff. Neil, great questions. Great prep. You were dialed for this one. I love it.
It's just osmosis, man. I mean, enough. You get your ass kicked by the same guy enough times. He keeps taking your lunch money. You want to learn a little bit about him. Maybe he's got some weak spots. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, we will hear more about his strengths and weaknesses in episode 2. We'll catch everybody over there. Cheers.